Your worship, we're live.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We'll begin our meeting with a moment of reflection. Thank you. I just wish to point out that with Oro-Medonte Council, we now have the land acknowledgement in regards to the moving towards reconciliation on our agendas now. We have a motion to adopt the agenda.
Moved by Councillor D'Souza, seconded by Councillor Scott. Be it resolved that the agenda for the special council meeting of Friday, January 15th, 2021, and Monday, January 18th, 2021, if required, be received and adopted.
All those in favor? Motion is carried. Anyone wishing to disclose a pecuniary interest at this time? Seeing none. Is there anyone on the queue for open forum, Madam Clerk?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I didn't hear your question.
Is there anyone in the queue for open forum?
No, there is not.
Thank you. And we have item 5, which is the one item on our report, and that's from Oro-Medonte CAO regarding the 2021 capital budget presentations and deliberations. So I'll turn it over to you, CAO Dunn.
Your Worship, would you like to pass the motion for 4 hours now, or would you rather wait till we are closer to that time?
Perhaps if we close it, if we pass it now, there's less of a chance we'll have to use it, so let's pass it now.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Kane, seconded by Councillor D'Souza. Be it resolved that Rule 14.19A, as per the Consolidated Procedural Bylaw number 2017-165, be suspended in order to allow the meeting to proceed past the 4-hour adjournment requirement.
All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Then we'll move on to item 5 and CAO Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Momentarily, there'll be a deck up on the screen that members of council have had an opportunity to review. I would like to have a few introductory comments, Mr. Mayor, and it goes back to the guidance we received from you in August, where we are right now. And Mr. Mayor, this is a significant budget session for 2021 and 2022. As council will recall, the guidance provided from council was to prepare a set of 2-year capital and operating plans. And we'll be doing that today and in all likelihood on Monday and early in the second week of February. Mr. Mayor, we have broken the deliberations into 2 main delivery components. The first is recognizing the direction on the 16th of December by council to consider or have staff present an accelerated road rehabilitation program. Effectively, Mr. Mayor, later this morning, council will have a presentation both by Mr. Delorier and Mr. Binns that will accelerate 3 years worth of work over 2. Certainly the direction on the 16th of December was also how would we pay for that? There will be a decision required by council with respect to debt financing. Mr. Mayor, my discussions with a number of your colleagues, both at the conclusion of 2020 and early this year, was it would have been super to be able to have all of the budget material for review over the holiday period. I think it's important to understand direction on the 16th was to try and certainly leverage timing from a tender and award perspective for an accelerated program. That required an awful lot of work just in that last week of December, and certainly the first couple of weeks of January. And I do apologize for the delivery of this material to you with only a few days lead time. I think what you've got is some very solid recommendations, Mr. Mayor. And in just a moment, I'll go through a couple more slides and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Delorier. And I would be remiss, Mr. Mayor, the material that's before you is a team effort. And I'm going to reference a number of my colleagues, and if I miss some members of council, I apologize. But you know, the newest contributors in finance, Mr. Nentek, Ms. Johnson, and certainly with the leadership of CFO Delorier, allowed the material to be rolled up. But you know, finance can't do that job without the extreme heavy lifting of every one of my colleagues in the departments. What's before you is part A of the equation, the hard assets. If you could skip through a couple of slides, please. What's before you is the part A, the hard assets. And part B will be, as I indicated at the get-go in February, that will be strategic initiatives. And Mr. Mayor, we've broken some of the capital program delivery into strategic initiatives. Members of council have had a number of discussions regarding leveraging technology and digital transformation. That material is anticipated to be with you by the end of this month, so that you have ample time to be able to review that prior to the operating and strategic initiatives deliberations. There'll also be the rest of the capital programs. The importance of a decision today or on Monday regarding these hard assets will allow Mr. Binns and his team and the other managers that will be speaking today to be able to get tender documents out. Mr. Mayor, we are right now looking at extremely favorable rates. It should the municipality go out for a debenture. We spoke about this on the 16th of December, and Mark has confirmed that right now 1.44 is the current 10-year rate. That is significantly advantageous from a debt investment perspective. The budgets, plural, have been developed in accordance with the guidance from council, a 2% tax increase focused on infrastructure renewal. We do have the new DC rates in place, and we're currently required by mid-year to have the asset management plan that will ensure that council understands from a long-term perspective how and where we need to continue to invest. Mr. Mayor,
excuse me, if I could ask, the 2%, is that our share you're talking about, or
Mr. Mayor, that 2% is solely the allocation that we talked about in August that is directed to capital infrastructure renewal.
But is it our share or blend?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Mr. Mayor. Dedicated our share.
Our share. Okay, thank you.
Associated with capital investment. And Mark will do a roll-up in February with respect to the overall potential impact as we're rolling up the operating budget and getting the direction today or Monday on these capital projects. Mr. Mayor, having the decision this week or early next week on these infrastructure projects, I've indicated previously it will position us, I believe, competitively to get good pricing for tenders. It's still very much confusing out there on, you know, at the end of the day, what will the pricing look like for both materials and construction responses? We don't know that. We want to get out at the front of the curve. And finally, Mr. Mayor, I do want to again thank every one of the senior managers that have put the material together that you're reviewing today on the capital side, the pieces that you'll be drilling down on early in February, and all the work that we're currently in process of doing a roll up on the operating budget. Mr. Mayor, with that, I will turn things over to Mr. Delorier, who will now, in conjunction with each one of the senior managers, do an overview and do a recap. And I think, Mark, you are going to allow the director to do the presentation, and you were going to do the recap. I believe that's how it was going to work. Mr. Mayor, over to Mark Delorier.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Robin. Yes, that is correct. This budget will follow similar paths what we've done for capital, where each director will talk specifically about their individual departments and requirements for capital. As Robin said off the top, these are base capital items. We made a decision to focus on only those assets requiring January approval, to really focus the discussion today so we don't get sidetracked on other things. And I think it made more sense to roll up the remaining capital items in February so that Council can have a look at the reserves, understand the impact of their decisions. A lot of the ones you'll see today are almost base requirements for base service levels. And there's only really, in my opinion, a few areas where there will be some good discussion in there. And as Robin mentioned off the top, you'll see a lot of details that Sean and his team have put together regarding an accelerated road program. So we did take the direction on the 16th, and over the holidays, Sean and his team were able to build a solid plan to pull forward $3.9 million of work from future years and be able to do that work now. So you'll see that in detail, even at the street level, to see what we're doing. And I'm not going to take away Sean's thunder like I usually do. I'm going to let him do that. But there's a fairly detailed presentation on roads and bridges, which will follow in a moment. And you'll get a good background on probably the biggest expense that we have from a capital perspective for the township. And I'll let Sean go through that, and then he will talk through other items in operations first, regarding rolling stock and heavy equipment and other equipment. And then we'll follow in order. Next will be fire, and there'll be some presentation by Chief Murray regarding the trend in fire and some of the new news that happened this week. And again, that'll help give some background for some of the capital requests that are coming through. I don't believe this meeting, I'm not going to predict it won't go long. I think it goes as long as it needs to. And I do apologize off the top for some late delivery of materials. It's been a real sprint to get here throughout the last year. And a lot of lifting has been done, but I hope you find the materials, including the capital justification sheets that we uploaded yesterday, are helpful in providing some background for some of the requests today. So we will recap at the end regarding the debenture piece. There is a recommendation in there for a debenture for to start now and try and capitalize on that favorable rate. I don't know how long that's going to last, and I am looking forward to some good discussion with our council on that direction and support for our recommendation. So I'm going to move now to Sean. Sean, you and your team can present the next piece. I will drive the slides for you. And at any point in time, if council has any questions, we welcome for you to interrupt and ask questions.
Thanks, Mark. And through you, your worship, I think what I'd like to do, and a number of these slides you've probably seen in prior presentations, but felt that it was important that we did provide some background as part of the capital program on the transportation side, just for the benefit of any members from the public that may be watching. So we'd like to just walk through that. We'll speak about specific projects. And if, as Mark alluded to, if there are any questions as we walk through, I'll attempt to pause on each of the slides that speaks about specific projects, and if there are questions, we can walk through that. So, Mark, if you could advance to the next slide, please. So, as I think all council knows, we have over 600 kilometers of roadway across the township, probably more than the majority of municipalities in the county. And your worship, as you like to say, it's the equivalent of driving up to Thunder Bay. So kind of a bit of context and background. In 2007, we had about 390 kilometers of hard surface roads and 226 kilometers of gravel roads. And fast forward to 2020, following council's strategic road paving program, we now have almost 600 kilometers of hard surface roads and 16 kilometers of gravel roads. As Mr. Deloria alluded to, our roadway infrastructure, roads and bridges, is the township's largest asset class. The road network does touch all residents and aspects of daily life. And as you recall, the external survey that was completed a number of years ago that looked at satisfaction and importance, roads along with fire and emergency services were top of the list. And kind of recognizing that it's important that we have a long-term strategic master plan to guide our road network. You'll recall that last year you received the roads needs study that was completed as part of the road network plan, road system and operations report that was completed. And the last section that we're currently working on is road standards. That will feed into our development standards and outline policy considerations for the management of our 600 plus kilometers of roadways. Next slide, please. So if we look at just the composition, I had mentioned hard surface and gravel and how that's evolved since 2007. We do have about a kilometer of concrete, Councillor Beach, that's up in Oro Hills. About 21 kilometers of gravel road. The majority of our roads, as you can see, are asphalt roads, and we do have a number of surface treated roads as well. And it's important to note that the surface is just one component of the asset. The other component is the granular base, and the condition of the base obviously impacts the quality and the condition of the asphalt itself. So this is a slide that I think all of council is familiar with. You've seen this as part of our road network plan and roads needs study. What it does is take a pavement condition index, so it looks at the surface, the quality of the surface, and puts a rating in terms of good, excellent, good, fair, or poor. You can see that we've got a number of roads, about 35% that are in excellent condition. We have probably the biggest majority is in the range of kind of the top end of poor into to the good section, and a very small percentage of roads that are in really poor condition. So we'll speak to this again when we get into how projects were prioritized. So Mark, if I could get you to, yeah, thank you. So you've seen this before as well. And Deputy Mayor, you're an advocate of this, and this is about pavement preservation. And essentially, you know, if we were to look at that other slide again, those roads that are in the fair to the low end of good condition, looking at rejuvenation of those roads through things like crack sealing and micro surfacing bumps those roads back up into excellent condition. So, you know, you're really extending the life at a lower cost. And that's certainly part of our pavement management program as well. If you could advance the slide, please, Mark. Thanks. So this just kind of shows that that curve along the pavement condition axis on the left-hand side. You can see that the blue curves are the preventative maintenance and the road rehabilitation, and kind of what that does down at the bottom axis in terms of extending the life of the road. And that's really important because we do get a lot of inquiries from the public, and a lot of it has to do, I think, with perception. They'll email in and say my road is in poor condition, but there's been a road that's been paved twice in the last 10 years or in the last 15 years. And although it's not asphalt, it's a micro surfacing. So there's a bit of a perception piece, but it's important that the program incorporates those life cycle elements to ensure that we're trying to optimize the asset as best as we can. Next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So in 2017, we restructured the department and formed the Infrastructure and Capital Projects Division with an aim of increasing the focus on our roads and infrastructure. So since then, it's really been continuous improvement in terms of the development of a long-term plan for the management of our roads. And again, that is being refined through the road network plan. And as Mark has alluded to, and we'll allude to further, the refinement of our service levels in the asset management plan that will be completed. So there are, sorry, Mark, if we could go back to the last slide for a moment. Thank you. So there is a number of components in the pavement management program. We do have micro surfacing and crack sealing. We are doing some isolated section repair, whether it be patching or addressing some deficiencies. We do look at surface treatment in certain areas, particularly where there may be issues with the base and moisture and asphalt reconstruction. So the focus really is on managing the contracts. The contracts are quantity based, both for granular and asphalt. Ensuring quality and quantity control as part of that, financial management, optimizing the resources that we have available to us. And you'll see through the presentation, leveraging DC for growth-related improvements, and really looking at how we best utilize the capital that is made available for rehabilitation. And developing a multi-year program around life cycle. So as Mr. Dunn and Mr. Delorier alluded to, and for the benefit of the public, on the 16th of December, Council provided staff direction to augment the 2021-2022 capital road rehabilitation through a debentured investment not to exceed $4 million. And that was really, looking at capitalizing on the low interest rates to assist in closing the gaps in roads needs. And those needs have been identified both through the road needs study, as well as what we heard loud and clear from the public in the external customer service survey and capital renewal. to better manage the life cycle. So to move some of those roads that are in the red and yellow back up into the green and really change or enhance the quality. And there is a discussion around advancing priority roads in residential areas that we just haven't been able to address in our previous capital plans. So the 2021 to 2022 pavement management program does include provisions to debenture 3.9 million to augment the planned capital program. That breaks down to 1.9 million in 2021 and 2 million in 2022. That additional funding has allowed modification to the planned program, as I said previously, to advance resurfacing of our subdivision roads throughout the township, advancing the hard surfacing of the gravel section of Bass Lake Side Road between lines 8 and 9 that has been on the 5-year plan for a number of years and pushed off due to changing priorities, and the advancement of other priority roads needs, and advancing a number of projects forward, adding new projects based on needs will also give us additional capacity when we look at the 2023 to 2025 program, because a number of those roads were further down the 5-year plan, and advancing them will obviously allow us to advance other roads in their place as we look to refine that program. So what we're presenting to you today is inclusive of that additional 3.9 funding I previously spoke to. Our intent is, and this will be a little bit different from what you're used to. We're going to present a 2-year capital plan. And as Robin alluded to at the onset, we really, following that meeting in December, our priority was advancing a 2-year program, and that additional 3-year program will continue to be refined. Our plan is that that 5-year capital plan would be developed following the asset management plan and then presented to the 2023 to 2026 council in 2023. So we wanted to highlight how we put together and how we prioritize the 2-year plan that will be before you. And really, we looked at the pavement condition index that you saw previously. A lot of the roads that you'll see in the program are in that poor condition. We do have rehabilitation, as we spoke to as well. And then the other thing we look at it alongside of that is roadway classification. So we do have a classification system on our roadways, and it's really kind of risk-based and looking at traffic volumes and speeds. And unfortunately, that's why a number of the subdivision roads have been postponed, simply because the needs of our concession roads would have to take priority over those roads. We do look at all facets of risk management, tracking of complaints. The complaints that you receive, we certainly receive those as well, and many of them are indicative of the pavement condition that we spoke to earlier. We do look at optimizing the resources available, so trying to look at asset management long-term, not just simply addressing the worst first. It is a holistic and comprehensive program, and flexibility to adapt to changing needs. We've had to change our capital plan on a number of years, and hope to bring greater consistency, I think, in our program as we go through refinement of our service levels and the asset management plan. And as Robin alluded to, getting this before you now getting out has a bit of a first mover advantage, and we've seen that in the pricing that we've received over the past number of years. So it's our intent that following approval of the capital plan that we'd get this out as soon as we can to close. There is certainly a lot of uncertainty around pricing in a whole host of different industries, but flexibility there. And as we have in the past, we would also look at identifying a number of provisional projects as part of that tender based on pricing that we have flexibility to lock in pricing in the event that we have the capacity to advance additional projects. And aligning with our operational activities. And you'll hear more in our operating budget presentations, really kind of focusing on, again, from an asset management perspective, shouldering, drainage, and the roadside environment. Those are things keeping the water off the road. On our maintenance side of the house, lining up those programs so that when we do have a new road or a repaved road, that we've addressed a number of those things in advance. So the operating plan really is aligned with the capital plan in a lot of ways. And the other point around that is multi-departmental, multi-agency, looking at the plans from MTO, the County of Simcoe, and environmental services as to water line or water main replacements, making sure that we understand the timing of those projects and we align the best we can with those plans. And you'll see in the program as well, over the past number of years, we've really been looking at segment renewal. So again, kind of looking at across our major roads: Bass Lake Side Road, 1516 Side Road, Warminster Side Road, the Lakeshore, Line 7, looking at a multi-year approach and continuing to advance those. We've advanced segments in the past, continuing that segment improvement along those major roadways. So, Your Worship, members of council, this is a really high level review of, and it's tough across such a large municipality to depict all of those projects. We'll walk through them in more detail, but I think this is a good depiction of the 2-year plan across the township. And as you can see, it's pretty well dispersed as well in terms of, you can see the township settlement areas, and we'll walk through some of those projects. We have continuation of some haul route projects, and as I mentioned, the continuation of some of the segments. And you'll see, and you may recall from last year, sidewalks, and part of our official plan update exercise as we look at our settlement areas, we do have a requirement to ensure we provide for active transportation. And when we went through the DC study, really looking at our high growth communities and looking at walkway and sidewalk improvements, or the addition of walkways and sidewalks in those communities to connect to the community assets, whether it be the village in Craighurst, for example, in the retail areas, or the new school site, for example, in Horseshoe Valley. Next slide, please, Mark. So, Your Worship, maybe what we'll do is I'll walk through the 2021 and 2022 projects, and Mark, if we could maybe flip back to the map following that, and then we can entertain any questions or comments from members of council. So, Your Worship, I'm not going to walk through the budget and the budget associated with each. You have that in front of you. I don't know if you want me to go through each project in detail, or if it would be more advantageous, maybe just to look at the map and have some discussion with council around that.
Sean?
I think it probably would be better to look at the page that we have in front of us. I think a lot of council members have a good idea where these roads are. If you could just reference to where each of them are at the same time, just to remind council as you're talking about them from this chart.
Okay, Mark, and was there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one quick thing. On the right side, although the funding source is there by road, I would ask council not to focus on that at all. There is a slide in the deck that will talk about how all of the road rehabilitation and bridge work is funded, and it will roll that up. And it's really our discretion of where we assign those sources of funding. There's actually 7 different sources of funding. So although we have it there because we need to do it practically to roll it up, I would focus on columns 1 and 2, and I will roll up the funding source later. So I just wanted to maybe say that up front, Sean. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So Your Worship, I'll maybe just I'll go through the projects quickly, and then we'll flip back to the map. So in 2021, we have the continuation of the paving of Bass Lake Side Road from line 13 to 14. The continuation of the program on 1516 Side Road from line 6 to line 7. We have the Medonte Hills subdivision, which is up outside just in Moonstone. The Warminster Side Road from line 13 to line 12. Line 12 North, Mount St. Louis Road to Highway 12. Line 7 North from Horseshoe Valley Road to Bass Lake Side Road. And that is a haul route. We do get royalties in from aggregate extraction that goes into a haul route reserve. And the funding for this project would come from that reserve. And we have communicated to council around this one in the past that this is a road that will be uploaded to the county based on the county's capital plan. It's anticipated that that process will hopefully start this year, but it is a 5-year or more process, and the township is required to continue to maintain the road. So our approach on line 7 and the haul route has really been addressing the sections that are problematic, as opposed to a full reconstruction of that haul route. They are built to an increased standard given the weight of the trucks on the road. So it is a very costly endeavor. Line 9 North from Moonstone Road to Mount St. Louis Road. Next slide, please, Mark.
I might get back to the line 7 North aspect of it. Not the line 7 North that the county is taking over goes from highway number 11 straight through to the Horseshoe Valley Road. And the whole portion of that goes from highway number 11 to the Bass Lake Road. Am I correct on that?
That's correct, Your Worship.
So the other portion is not a haul route.
Utilized by trucks, so.
It is utilized by trucks, Your Worship, but it isn't designated a haul route.
But do we use money from the haul route renewal, infrastructure renewal for that section of the road as well?
Your Worship, there isn't a specific requirement that you need to use the haul route royalties for haul routes specifically. However, that has been our practice, and I think it's a good practice, recognizing the cost of rehabilitating haul routes, and we do
I would agree, because there is certainly that road is impacted by the heavy trucks.
Yes. Next slide, please, Mark. So we have a number of other residential areas in 2021, 6 streets in Shanty Bay. And we can walk through those locations on the map. Moonstone, the Robin Crest subdivision. And a lot of these subdivisions, your worship, are all of the same vintage, and the majority of them are all in that poor condition. Maplewood Parkway, line 10 south from Ridge Road to Lakeshore. We do have some patching. There's line 3 south. There's a dip in that segment that would be a localized repair to address an issue in the road segment there. And Woodland Drive, raising the road in a segment there.
John, did we ever determine what caused the dip in line 3 south?
We didn't, your worship. I don't know how long that has been there. We did do an engineered review of that last year, which basically looked at appropriate remedial actions there. So not sure what the initial issue was there, but we will be addressing that hazard in 2021. Next slide, please, Mark. Sugarbush cul-de-sac design. So there are a number of complications in the older section of Sugarbush, and that goes back from the initial development that really was a resort-based development, and over time that evolved, and the municipality had to facilitate the creation of cul-de-sacs, the creation of actual driveways, and snow removal is problematic there. So there are, as we look at the multi-year program, looking at doing some design work to rectify some of the issues that are there presently that will feed into to future year programs. Line 15 north culvert replacement, that's right along Bass Lake. There's a deficient culvert there that needs to be addressed. Georgian Drive Walkway, which is part of development, and line 9 north from Old Berry Road to Bass Lake. Again, a haul route project, but initiating design on that segment. And your worship, to your point around the haul route reserve, line 9 is an example of a pit that was inactive for a number of years, and over the past number of years has become more active, which is requiring additional work on that section.
Yeah. Sean, can I go back to the Sugarbush one, please?
Sure.
The cul-de-sac design, how many of those cul-de-sacs that we utilize for snow plowing? I know there's some that are off the side and we don't, and there's some that we do. How many of those do we actually come to a point with the snow plowing where we need to turn the plow around?
There's probably, your worship, and I'm just speaking off the top of my head, I think probably about 4 or 5, and each one has, there are some that there's additional lands that have been deeded to the township, but there's not, it hasn't been cleared, or there's additional work that would need to happen for us to be able to improve the maintenance of those cul-de-sacs. So the focus would be on the ones that are really problematic, that don't have areas for us to store snow properly. Yeah, there's probably about 4 or 5, but each one has their own little nuances as well. Topography at the upper part of the hill, there's houses kind of built into the bank. So there are a number of challenges, but it's probably 4 or 5, I would say.
Okay, and do we have any issues in Sugarbush where there has to be work done on the water system as well as we look at what we're doing with roads? Your
worship, that is correct. There are some water upgrades that are starting in 2021. So that's been factored into our plan and why we're doing the design work this year, and then paving. You'll see in the next slide, actually, as we move to 2022, that our work would actually follow the work from environmental services. So shifting over to 2022, Country Club Lane in Birch Grove, Bass Lake Side Road from line 8 to line 9, and that's the segment that's currently gravel. You'll recall a number of years ago, or you may recall a number of years ago, we looked at a number of options there that involved acquisition of lands and trying to widen the road in segments, and that is a very costly endeavor. What we're proposing, and you'll see on the map, is actually a surface treated segment through there, and it's really keeping the existing conditions and not looking at any kind of land acquisition. The cost would be, just from a cost benefit perspective, we believe this is the optimal solution through that area.
Sean, can we have a real commitment that we're actually going to get that done? Because it seems to me we put that off for 10 to 15 years.
Your worship, we've advanced that, recognizing that it's a priority of council. That commitment certainly rests with council, and we have been able to advance it. As I've said, I think we've also peeled it back from the original scope that was well over $1 million to something that does make it feasible when we look at optimizing the resources that we have across the network.
Well, your recommendation for what to do is very much in line with what I've been thinking should have been done for a while. So I'm glad to see we're back to a point where it is financially feasible.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ski Trails Road from line 2 to line 3, continuation on the 15-16 side road, line 6 to line 5. Warminster Side Road, again, continuation of the segment improvements. Line 9 north from Old Berry Road to Bass Lake Side Road, and that is a haul route segment. And Your Worship, to your question earlier, the 6 streets in Sugarbush. Next slide, please. Again, continuing with the theme that you'll see throughout the 2-year program, looking at the Simcoe side development along the lakeshore, and a number of streets. That whole development in Simcoe side, you can see that's a sizable investment. There's a number of homes and small roadways through that area. Again, Lakeshore Road from line 9 to line 10 around the same area, and line 12 to 13 on Lakeshore. Continuing with asphalt patching and cul-de-sacs in Sugarbush. And looking at the rehabilitation side of things, we have a budget of $200,000 for micro surfacing, and $40,000 for crack sealing, both in 2021 and in 2022. And Deputy, we are doing really well on the micro surfacing and crack sealing program. And when we look at the roads, as I mentioned previously, in that PCI of around 60 to kind of mid 70s, you'll see that we're micro servicing as many roads as we can. Once roads get to a certain state, it just doesn't make sense to micro surface. So that allocation of about $200,000 is proving to be optimal when we look at life cycle renewal across the network, and that may change with condition over time. but it is an optimal allocation at this point. Looking at sidewalks, and you can see from the funding formula here, these are areas that based on growth, there is a funding allocation in the split that does come from development charges. The line 4 north, there was a walkway that was put in, really just an extension of the shoulder a number of years ago from from Highland to the Horseshoe Valley Memorial Park. This would take it, formalize a walkway. We completed the design in 2020. So the construction would take place in 2021, and that would be a walkway from Highland to the new school site, the nurse practitioner clinic, and the Horseshoe Valley Memorial Park. And then looking over in Warminster, Danny McHugh Park to Preston Drive. So the residential development in behind the Legion, there are walkways in there that come out to Warminster side road through Danny McHugh Park. So it would be continuation in the collection of those residential developments up along Warminster side road to the school and to the village of Warminster. Next slide, please. And I'll speak to the bridges and culverts as well, and we can look at that on the map. But we do have 50 bridges and structures across the township over 3 meters. We have a legislative requirement to inspect each of those bridges on a biannual basis. The inspections are done through what we call OSIM, the Ontario Structure Inspection Manual. And similar to what we identified in roads needs, they do identify what's called a BCI, a Bridge Condition Index, and identify any defects, performance deficiencies, what maintenance may be required, and allocate a financial requirement to do that. So we do know at any point in time the condition of our bridge network and the cost to remediate our bridges. And this is one you'll recall from previous presentations from Steve Riley at Burnside. When you look at 50 bridges and structures, the average cost for the majority of our bridges in current dollars is about $1 million. So it is a very significant expense across the township. Next slide, please. And I won't go through this in any level of detail, but similar to our roads, you can see just the inventory of our structures, what kind of structures, and what kind of structures we have. Next slide, please. And similar to the pavement condition index, you can see here we do have a number of roads that are in excellent condition. Those are pardon me, bridges. Those are bridges that have been redone in the past number of years. We do have a number of structures that are in poor condition as well, and a number of structures that are in fair and very in line with the maintenance curve on the road assets. The same thing applies for bridges. As you complete remedial work in that fair condition, you can bump up the life cycle and extend the life cycle. So as we look at the refinement of our asset management plan, a bridge program is certainly going to be an area of focus as we look at and updating our long-term capital and financial plans. Next slide, please. So we always like to give you this and show you some empirical data on what this kind of looks like over time, and you can see the average BCI since 2016, 2017 has actually increased. So that's a good thing. You don't want to see that going the other way. We have been able to move a number of the bridges that have been in fair condition and poor condition up into to the good category. So the 2020 bridge inspection program identifies 4.25 million in bridge work within the immediate time frame, and an additional 4.31 million in the 1 to 5 year time horizon. And that's really kind of what we would call the gap. And you know, this gap is not localized to Oro-Medonte by any means. This is a challenge across every municipality across the country to be able to look at the long-term funding to close those gaps. What we're proposing in the bridge program is only to address the urgent high priority works, and similar to what I alluded to with our the maintenance side of operations, that this is an area of focus for us in our maintenance plans as well, in terms of ensuring that we're doing everything we can with the resources that we have to be able to optimize maintenance and life cycle on the bridges. So getting the water off, making sure things are draining, those kinds of things. Addressing infrastructure requirements and sustainable funding, as I mentioned, will be reviewed as part of our asset management plan. In 2021, there's 2 specific projects looking at the replacement of a culvert on line 2 north of Ridge Road, and doing the design work for the bridge on line 10 north of 1516. Looking at 2022, that design would turn to construction on line 10 north 1516 side road, and then starting the design process for line 13 south south of 1516 side road. Your worship, just a couple slides on guide rail and barriers across the road network. The roadside safety system is the requirements are set out by the MTO roadside safety manual, which is basically the guideline to be used for risk assessment in determining the need, type, and extent of roadway safety measures. That also forms part of the OSIM report, and the estimated cost of guide rail improvements across the township is about just under $2 million. So again, we look at prioritization here and looking primarily at areas that are deficient or high risk in terms of being able to address. So you can see, next slide, please, Mark. Next slide, bridge on line 1 south is a new installation. On 2021 side road is a new installation, and engineering for 2022 to 2023 projects. And you can see the allocation is 125,000 for 2021 and 125,000 in 2022. So your worship, that is a very high level review of all of the roads capital program. Mark, if I could ask if we could flip back to the map on page 16. And your worship, I'll turn it back over to you if there are any questions or comments from members of council.
I have a question of council. A lot of this numbers and looking at this is pretty heady work. Please let me know when it's an appropriate time if you'd like a break, because you know, going through all these numbers and aspects are things that sometimes you need more of a break from than you would from a normal council meeting. But Mark, are you about to sort of look at this map and go with a longer presentation, or is this a fairly brief one on this map?
Your worship, on the map, it's really more questions on the detailed projects. I think that's really the focus is there any question about the 2021-22 capital program? I will be, we'll be summarizing the capital request in some future slides, which are brief. And I will also be rolling it up, showing how we're paying for the road and bridge capital program in a later slide. So really it's questions for council on the specific projects, I believe. And I will be rolling up by year for not only 2021-22, but the 3-year allocation for the road program to show you kind of what our rolling capital forecast is, and it's in line with previous years. Back to you, Your Worship.
If I could begin with a comment, I'm really glad to see that we are tackling some things that we've been putting off, and that's certainly a number of these roads and subdivisions that have been down there sometimes for over 30 years, and there's other problems that go with them. Glad to see that we are finally making a decision on that short section of Bass Lake Road that is a major connector. So I believe that we would never be able to catch up to the projects that you've laid out on this map unless we did use a aggressive moving forward. Are there questions on this map about any specific project? Councillor Greenlaw?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Scott, first of all, I'd like to echo the mayor's comments. I think the decks have been very helpful and they're very efficient at getting to the point. Question I had is, could you maybe briefly explain, you've got each project, the budget number set to it, and yet it's yet to go out to tender. So I assume you've been very cautious to set those numbers based on most recent work and what has to be done. So if you could kind of explain that briefly to us, and then the follow-up would be, just so you maybe you could answer at the same time, would be if we come in with a tender that saves us money rather than putting it into reserves, would we just try to advance the agenda that has been set in the budget presentation?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Greenlaw, good questions. I mentioned previously, we structure this as a quantity based tender. So we estimate, we do the field work on looking at the existing conditions. We estimate the requirements for granular and asphalt, and that forms the basis of the tender. It does get a little more challenging with some of the residential roads. There's culvert installations, there's more utilities. So we look, as best as we can to try and quantify that, and then we roll that up and apply, an appropriate contingency based on just assumptions on asphalt, which is really kind of based on the asphalt price index. We don't anticipate, although we're uncertain, we've certainly maintained communication with the industry around what might be happening with pricing. It's certainly not the same, and you'll hear from the chief around what's happening for the price of building materials and lumber and those kinds of things. Really what we're talking about here is specialized equipment, labor, granular and asphalt emulsion. So we do build the tender with provisional items that give us that flexibility that we can, if something needs to drop off, then we can drop off. And we do identify provisional projects as well. So as I mentioned, if we do get preferred pricing, that we can move forward with additional projects. And we do try and stage gate that, recognizing that when the tender comes in, the pricing is based off of those estimates that we do have. So any of the provisional projects we won't advance until we get, we have certainty that we're not going to see a significant cost overrun on a specific project. So you'll see when we present the roll up from 2020, there'll be a few projects that we're over budget on and a few projects that we're under budget on. So that's just from a project management structure, how they'd be procured and how they're managed. And I guess the other thing to note, those provisional projects, we do have to report back to council. So council would, we'd report back to council with the results of all of those components in a report prior to issuing the tender. If council, if pricing did come in and if we did receive preferable pricing, we'd likely recommend that we advance or try to advance the provisional projects. But at that point in time, council could decide to advance those projects, or if we're anticipating a surplus, the funding could go back, be directed to go back into the reserves. But past practice has certainly been that we've tried to take advantage of those situations and address more of the roads needs based on the planned allocations.
Sean, if I could just add to your comments, that those are right bang on. That's what I would have said as well. Yeah, we're planning with our resolution is to approve an allocation of dollars. The allocation to the specific projects is based on some science, like Sean said, will be up or down, but it is a quantity-based tender. And that's really what we'll be looking for council is to endorse the allocation, knowing that we have a plan and that we have some good science behind the allocation. So council, we will have that decision with a report, as Sean said. If we are below our budget with the tender pricing, it's up to you whether you'd like to put the money back in reserves or use the provisional projects.
Thank you very much. That was that's a great answer, and they explained it in great detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beach.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff. Again, I don't want to be repetitive, but I do want to echo the mayor's concerns at your comments, and congratulations to you guys, Mark and Sean and the whole team there. What a great job. This looks so good with the accelerated projects that are in line that we haven't been able to get to for a long time. And certainly the cul-de-sacs that have been problematic in Moonstone and in Sugarbush and others are now on the slate for this year and next year, which is great. And I'm sure Sean, Scott, and I are feeling pretty good about this 8-9 Bass Lake improvement gravel road that will be paved over. We've had quite a few requests for that one. I would just ask Sean, in the Moonstone ones, which are coming up this year, I know the 6 streets in Medonte Hills subdivision, which are probably almost the worst in the township, which are going to be done, which is great. The Robin Crest subdivision, could you say a little bit more about that one in terms of how many roads there'd be in that piece and what that would involve?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Beach. Yeah, so there's 4. There's Agnes, Duncan, Ellen, and I can't recall the other one in that development. But we can provide you with that information.
Okay, well, that would be great. Thank you.
Is it Boyd, Sean?
Yeah, I think you're right, Chief.
Boyd.
Yeah, Boyd's in good shape. What about Moon? Is it part of that?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor De Sousa.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Sean. I'm wondering about the sidewalks that you're installing in Warminster. I understand they'll go to provide access to the school, but I'm wondering, will it be on the 13th as well, specifically from Warminster Side Road south to Grace Crescent? Is that part of the plan, or is that not part of the plan?
John?
Your worship, through to Councillor D'Souza. It is part of our longer term plan. This would be on the east side. There are a number of segments that we're looking on the west side, just not in the 2-year horizon.
Okay, now just regarding funding on that, I heard a rumor, and that's all I can state, is that some time ago, the developer of that Grace Crescent development there that's been there for a few years ago, offered funding for sidewalks from the school to Grace. And I was wondering if that was accurate, and if it was, whatever happened to that, and is it possible to bring that forward?
Don?
Your worship, through to Councillor D'Souza. I'm not certain. We'd have to look into the file and the background on that. I can tell you that as part of the development review process, we do look at active transportation in the settlement areas, and you've seen that likely in prior developments, and you'll see that as development applications move forward, that we do look at that requirement and leveraging what we can from developers to ensure, no different than the installation of our roadways, and our development standards actually identify sidewalk requirements as well. So it is looked at in each development. I can't speak to what may have happened historically without looking that up. But if it's done, the development's completed, it's not something that we'd be able to go back on. And, you know, as I said, with our DC funded projects, and, you know, you'll see in the funding split as well, when we look at even the walkway from Highland Drive to the Line 4 Park. And this is the importance, I think, of our DC studies and longer term asset management, is recognizing what those needs are will allow us to effectively collect the growth related monies for growth related infrastructure. And if we don't do that in our DC studies, you know, we get to a point where those needs become there, and then they need to be borne from the tax levy. So instead of being able to recover a larger percentage from development, it no longer is development related. It's based off an existing level of service. So it needs to be self-funded. So that's certainly the challenge. But you'll hear from Ms. Lee in her presentations around updates to our official plan. And I spoke previously about the requirement for active transportation. There are a number of needs that we've identified for walkways in all of our settlement areas: Craighurst, Warminster, Shaney Bay, Moonstone. So it is part of a longer term plan, and something that we need to do more work on as we look at that longer term plan.
Okay, my only concern is that's, you know, the route to the school. And I know that developer is a common developer in that whole neighborhood. So, and that they do have ongoing involvement there. And I just wondered if that was a possibility for discussion in the future for that purpose.
Councillor D'Souza, absolutely.
Councillor Kane, do I see your card up?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to, like everyone here, I want to say thank you to you, Mr. Robinson and Mr. Mattress. I was wondering how you were going to pull this off with the Christmas coming, but thank you. The Woodland Road, I just want to be clear, that's not Woodland Crescent?
It's Woodland Drive, Councillor Kane.
Right. I hate to say this with this wonderful map in front of us, but I'm just wondering if there is anything, any opportunity, if Woodland Crescent can be looked at. I'm very happy with what I see with Sugarbush, Shaney Bay, those residential areas. Woodland Crescent, the lower half, and I've talked to you about this before, it is actually falling apart. So I was just wondering if maybe there could be a little note made if things go well in the next year or two, because I don't see it on the next 2 years. The sugar bush, that, correct me if I'm wrong, but this aligns perfectly with the announcement with the internet. I'm not sure if that parallels each other, and I'm not sure if that's something that you were actually thinking, Sean. So when I saw that, I thought that was a great thing. The other question, or actually two questions. Was there any unused capital allocations from last year? Funding from the budget?
Your worship, through to Councillor Kane, I'll maybe go through each one. In speaking to Mr. Metris, we can certainly look at Woodland Crescent as a provisional project. It is a fairly small segment, so we could look at that. And I think, you know, through you, your worship, to all of council, we spoke about the additional flexibility that we now have in 2023 to 2025. So if there are projects that you don't see here, I think if you could certainly let us know, and we'll look at that in those projects. I would say that, you know, I think from a governance perspective, we do have a pretty good methodology that that council has been supportive of how we've been prioritizing. But if there are specific projects, certainly feed them over, and we can look to get those in the hopper. Councillor Kane, we certainly can't take any credit around the internet side of things, although you're right, it does line up pretty nicely. And lastly, we are anticipating a minor favorable variance that will be rolled up of probably about $100,000 on the roads capital. There was a number of moving pieces with different things that needed to change. We did have a bridge project that went out that was over, as you recall, that formed part of it, but overall we're about $100,000, I believe, in a favorable position. So that just goes back into the reserves. While we are debenturing, the remaining funding does come from reserve funds. So essentially, we're using pulling from that reserve, or the allocations in the reserve have given us the allocations for the 2-year program before you.
If I may continue, Mayor Hughes?
Sure.
You read my mind when I was wondering if there was anything left over, if it was going back into the reserve. So you answered that question. And the last one, I'm wondering if you can elaborate on what the Georgian Drive Walkway is.
I'll actually let Mr. Metris speak to this one.
Through your worship, to Councillor Kane, the Georgian Walkway joins up Georgian Drive, and I believe it's Richelieu. There was some property that was sold to the residents there recently, just this fall. And we retained enough land through there to put a walkway, so because people do or have historically walked between the two streets. So we're just creating a hard surface and a proper location for them to walk.
Okay, thank you. It's everything said sidewalk, and I just wanted clarification, so that's great. Thanks so much. And by the way, since I have your ear, I just want to say thank you for Baycrest. It wasn't even on the list when I first took the seat, and residents and myself are really happy to see Baycrest on this year. So I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Hoff.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to say sorry for being late, but I did send an email advising staff I would be late, but I did get an email and a phone call from staff wondering where I was. So, but I did let you know. And I do have one question on the budget, and I'm sorry, Sean, you probably already gave it to us. On page 9, the 1986 rehab unit.
Deputy Mayor Huff, we've not reached that portion of the presentation. We'll actually be going through that shortly, so we can answer
sorry.
your question at that time. We've
Sorry,
just
that's
focused
on,
on, no worries. We've just focused on the bridge program and roads.
Yeah, that's on vehicles, right, sorry. And one question now, Bass Lake Side Road has been mentioned a couple of times and it should have been done long ago. And the only reason it wasn't was because the ridiculous budget quotes that came in. So have we got any estimates on that road now? Because we were way over $1 million initially to do that short stretch.
Deputy Mayor, if I might include on that, I've already commented on that. The ridiculous prices, as you call them, and I would agree, had to do with a very elaborate amount of work on that. I remember if you were on council where enough were advocating to make that road hardtop without going through that enormous price, and staff have come back and concluded that's exactly the way to do it without acquiring more land. And I believe the amount of money attached to that is 350,000. And so I was glad to see that, and I'm sure you would be as well.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to echo my colleagues, Mr. Binns, to all your staff, outstanding job as always. And as far as any further wish list items, I'll discuss that with you in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions then? Staff, you're going to have to give me an indication. We're coming at a point where we've been talking about numbers for about an hour and a half. I expect the council would like a break at some point. Is this an appropriate place to have a brief break?
From a staff side, Your Worship, it is.
All right, so we will take a 10:23 by my clock, whether it's anybody else's. We'll take a 7-minute break then.
Your worship, we're live.
Great. So I believe, Mark, you were going to proceed.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you very much. So we're going to move into the details by department. So I'm going to advance to the next slide. I wanted to summarize the 5-year road pavement management program, and it shows you what our allocation is on the left side, the expenditure. So you see we have $19.7 million over the 5-year period. That's in line with what we've spent. And we've talked all along, that's not really keeping us up on our priorities. And the acceleration, which was identified on December 16th of 3.9 million, you'll see in the second column, the special acceleration adds 3.9 to that for a total spend for 5 years of 23.6. We're asking council to approve 21 and 22 capital programs. The other 3 years are provisions for dollars, not yet assigned, and will come out of, as Sean mentioned, the asset management plan and using our prioritization strategy and methods. So the total spend of $6,060,000 for 2021 and $5.6 million for 2022. I wanted to really recap for people how we fund construction, and it's actually done in a certain manner so that we use reserves last. So the one that's at the top, the infrastructure renewal reserve, that's our last resort. We try and find sources of funding that are available to us to fund stuff. So you can see that the balance is 6.5 million will be coming out of the infrastructure renewal reserve. The debt financing we spoke about, that's something that we're going to be asking council to approve us moving forward on. If you approve the capital program and the special acceleration, that $3.9 million will be funded by some low interest debt over a 10-year period. The tax levy portion, 6.5, that's arbitrary. We could put more money in reserves and use all reserves. We just allocate a portion of the tax levy each year to road pavement management. So for 2021, it's 1 million. 2022 is 1.2, all the way up to 1.5. So that adds up to the $6.5 million. We just, the way we do our math is that way. And we also have the OSIF grant, which is an Ontario grant that we, up prior to 2020, we were using for water infrastructure. And in I believe it was 2020, we used it for the 5th, 6th side road, or it might have been 2019. But we've been using that reserve, and that's about $183,000 per year we get in a formula-based OSIF grant. And we're counting on that continuing through the 5-year period that it's available. We also have the gas tax, and in, I believe it was 2019, through AMO, we had received a double up payment of the gas tax. We typically got about $690,000 per year or $650,000 per year. They actually doubled up and gave us $1.3 million. And what we decided to do with that is to spend that money in 2020 and 2021. So in 2021, we're actually going to use up $1.1 million of federal gas tax money, and that will bring our reserves back down to the regular levels. And then thereafter, 2022 through 2024, we'd be using $683,000 per year, $689,000 per year in gas tax money. As Sean mentioned, the haul route reserve is really an allocation of monies. I don't believe that the cost of reconstruction, that we're getting enough aggregate royalties for that. I think last year we received $260,000 for our aggregate royalties. And if you see that we're using up, haul route reserve of 1.2, that's not keeping up with the spend. So that's something that's, I'm not saying not to have the county assume those roads. I don't think it's a cash win for us. I think it'd be something that would be welcomed by myself and the Treasury. Also development charges. We did our background study in 2019 and really focused on identifying growth related projects. We do plan to do a refresh in the next year or two to make sure we are in line with the new Horseshoe Craighurst plan that's been approved, as well as other areas of the township. So we were able to pay for some road projects and some sidewalk projects with DCs. And you'll see through the presentation that we've got even vehicles and other construction that is supported by DCs, which is basically development paying for growth, which is what we want to see. So really the math is the infrastructure reserve is what's left. And this is how we would fund the program. But specifically for 21-22, the $3.9 million is debt financing recommendation at a favorable rate. I'll take any questions, Your Worship, on this slide before I move into the details by department.
Councillor Scott has one.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Delorier, just a quick question. Council was quite comfortable, I suppose, with $4 million at the extremely low rate of 151. I think we're at 144 now. I'm just curious as to why we're 3.91 as opposed to 4.
I guess it's tomato on the balance. I agree with you. It could be 4. The reason it's 3.9, just from a roll-up perspective, is we attached it to specific projects that we advanced. We didn't just say, let's spend $4 million more and allocate it. It was strategic in pulling forward projects from 2024 and 2023 and bringing them forward at least 2 years. So it's really an academic roll-up, and we want to be accurate and specific. In reality, when we go to approve the debt financing, we can round that up to 4. We did that with the elevated storage project for water, where the cost was 4.9 million. We borrowed 5. So it can be 4 million, and we want to make sure that when we come to you for approval on the debenture, that we aren't scientific, because we know it's not going to be exact, but we'll probably be in the 4 million range for that piece.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, it's Robin. Could I comment, please, sir?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, just through you to Councillor Scott. Councillor, earlier, Mr. Binns talked about the scenario of some contingency projects. Mark has talked about the funding level that you raised perhaps could be a little higher. Based on the response that will come to the tender documents, for Sean to award, he has to prepare a contract award and present to council. And Mark, we could be in a position, as you just indicated, to be able to access additional funding from a debenture perspective. I guess, Councillor Scott, that would all be contingent on what comes forward from a costing perspective in the tenders. Mark, I think that's consistent with what you said. I just wanted to double down on there will be a formal report that will come back to council regarding the award. And Mark, you require a bylaw to be able to endorse the debenture issue.
Absolutely, Robin. And when we get to the last slide of the budget presentation, we will be asking to consolidate the township spending for a consolidated debenture, which cuts down on legal costs and work for everyone involved, and have a schedule to lay out exactly what that's funding. From our annual repayment limit from our FIR, we actually have, and I mentioned last time, I think about $40 million potential to borrow over 10 years. We're now at the end of 2019, we were $8.3 million. It's even lower now at the end of 2020. And we're adding another potential $6.5 million. So we're still way under our cap. We need flexibility for other things, but we're by no means at our debt borrowing limit. And it seems when we do borrow, it is always at a strategic time to do it. And in the past, bridges have always been debt finance. We've never used infrastructure, but for 2019 and 2020, we did not borrow. And you'll see in my slide that we did complete some bridge work. It was even higher than our budget, and it did come out of the infrastructure renewal reserve, which is again stretched, is that we'll be requesting to borrow for the 2020 project as well, given the low rates, and repay the reserve for that money.
Thank you, Mr. And thank you, Mr. Dunn, for My only thought on it was that if we were comfortable with that formula, and I appreciate and respect your answer, Mr. Gloria. I just thought that 90,000 just on the off chance that Mr. Binns and Mr. Metris and Mr. Robinson in estimates for this year going forward, next year going forward, just in case there's some changes in the costing, it just afford that much more flexibility. But you guys are the money people, so you know the numbers better than I do. Thank you.
Hey, Councillor Scott, whatever is going on with your computer, it's kind of breaking up. We did hear you, but if you could make this minor adjustment to speak in the future. Councillor Beach.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mark or Robin. This looks very encouraging. I have no issues with it at all. I think we all understand the rates with debt financing. And I realize the DCs are pretty light here in terms of how they might be applied against the road program. Just really for you, Robin and Mark, just when do we have to confirm when we will review the DC charges if there's a need to up them this year? Because it is something that we talked about earlier. And if you don't want to talk about it here, maybe you can find a time we can chat about it.
Through your worship to Councillor Veach, I can address that. The requirement is that we do it at least every 5 years. So we've done our DC on October 23rd, 2019. So by 2024 is the latest we could do it. It is in our, you'll see this in February, what part of our strategic initiatives is to do that. I think it might be the end of 2021 or 2022, but our intention is to do it when it's possible. And you'll see in our February presentation, we have a lot of initiatives that need to move us forward. So it's really a matter of time and priority. So there's a lot going on. And so we want to make sure we do it to capitalize on that so we can update our DCs to properly collect the right amounts, identify future projects that maybe we didn't see in the 2019 background study. But that's the plan right now is 2021 or 2022, and we'll firm that up as we get into our operating strategic initiatives.
Thank you. So we'll know that, just supplementary, Mark, so we'll know that, have a better sense of it after our February sort of roll up. Eh?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Proceed then, Mark.
Okay, I'm going to move into the slide. Sean's going to be back on. Hopefully Sean's had a boatload of water. He did a lot of talking and a great presentation. But Sean and his team will go through the operations piece. I'll actually cover off the first four because these were already, this is summing from Sean's slides. And you saw the first two lines just on the previous slide that the 2021 and 2022 road pavement program are there, 6 million and 5.6. And the bridge work that Sean had a couple slides on, 775 and 950. You know, we always do the engineering work a year ahead. So the 2022 has work that's going to be done in 2023. So, and as I alluded to in previous comments, that the bridge work is always budgeted to be debt financed, and we're going to recommend that we do that as well. And so the next page and a half are really details of specific assets. And what we asked our team to do is only show the stuff that needs stuff for tender pricing or lead time. And you'll see with any heavy equipment or rolling stock or pickup trucks, there is a definite lead time. And there's also a strategy on being able to get some favorable consolidated purchasing. So we're going to go through these in detail. There was a one pager for each of these that was in the package that had some background on it. And I'll ask that the directors go through line by line. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them during the presentations. Well, Sean, I'm going to pass it back to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I've got about a slide and a half here, Your Worship, members of council. So maybe what we'll do is we'll go through the projects on the slide, and then if there's any specific questions, we can go through that prior to advancing to the next slide. There is a number of replacements here, and that's done according to our life cycle, which is generally 20 years for our heavy equipment. Our tandem trucks have a life cycle or replacement of 14 years. We did bump that from 12 to 14 years a number of years ago, given some of the pressures on our vehicle replacement reserves, and something we want to look at in greater detail as we refine our asset management plan. But there is a number of replacements. I won't spend any time on those outside of the life cycle replacement components. So we do have a 1999 cat loader. You'll recall actually that that came forward to council, was approved in 2020. We've executed the agreement. We just don't take delivery on it till 2021, which is why it was budgeted. And again, a good news story on the acquisition of that additional loader that we received from the county, that has really been working out well to address that need. Replacing a 2007 snowplow. We have a new tandem snowplow, and just to piggyback off of the funding sources that Mark was talking about, this is an example of development charges paying for development related infrastructure. So we do have some new fleet. There's a pickup truck as well as the snowplow, and this is fully DC funded. And there's a number of reasons for this. One, we have new development coming on stream. All of the planning applications that have been approved over the last couple of years, we essentially, as soon as the roads are built, we assume, or I shouldn't say we assume maintenance, but we conduct maintenance under contract. So that is a fee for service arrangement with the developer, but essentially as soon as the roads are built and houses are constructed, we assume the maintenance, or we conduct the maintenance until assumption, and then at assumption, it's no longer a fee for service agreement, it becomes our responsibility. So the acquisition of a new truck, certainly as we take on development, we have more work to do. If we didn't have new resources to deal with that, we'd simply have to absorb that into our existing snow routes, and obviously that impacts the level of service. So you've heard the word optimize quite a bit in our presentations, and I think this is another example of optimization, that we look at optimizing our routes on an annual basis to make sure that the winter maintenance provisions and maintenance provisions in general are conducted appropriately. So this will allow us to optimize our routes, optimize our maintenance activities, and ensure that we have appropriate redundancy. Councillor Scott, I think you brought that forward last year in terms of replacing some of our vehicles, and if we could keep some of the older trucks so that we had that redundancy, and we do that. And it was a good thing we did, because we did have a number of fairly significant breakdowns with a bit of cracked frame on a truck as well, that we needed to kind of cycle out prematurely. So that's really the essence in the purchase of the new truck, is to optimize and ensure that that development is paying for the development related infrastructure, and it is fully DC funded.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. I believe that's a question.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Are you guys reading me any better? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we'll see. Sort of. Okay. Mr. Binns, just a quick question. Do any of our trucks, do any of them fall under the new self-steering lift axle SPIF configurations? And if so, do we have funds to retrofit all of those?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Scott, I'll maybe defer that question to Ms. Musso Garcia, who I believe is online.
Thank you. Our trucks do not fall under that category. We do not have any of the trucks that have a drop lift axle. So we would not be required to do any of the alterations on that.
Perfect. Thank you. I understand it's about $30,000 a pop, so that's good.
Okay, proceed.
We this is a multi-year project replacing the north and south yard fuel pump. So we do have a diesel fuel system for our equipment. One at the north and one at the south. They're both in-ground systems. There's changes in the regulations that required us to replace. We started that process. We're largely complete at the north yard in 2020. We do have to remove the tanks from the north yard and ensure that any remediation that is required is taken care of. And then the replacement of the in-ground tanks and the delivery system at the south yard.
And Sean, I just want to comment on the change in the pricing. It's not like the pricing went up $60,000. There was after publishing the slides, I realized that we'd only had the South Yard fuel pump program in there. So that was a correction on my part. And we need to have kind of the history for the public who may have received a previous version of the slides. So I wanted to show the change there so that they can see that.
Thank you, Mark. Next slide, please. So we have a number of scheduled replacements of a number of pickup trucks. You can see there's 3 of those and 2 early replacements associated with our response to COVID-19. I think all the council's aware our business continuity plans require or have provisions for us to minimize sharing of vehicles. So we've actually been renting 4 vehicles over a period of time since our response started. The cost of renting a pickup truck, and we do have a really good rate on that, is about $1,000 a month based on what we're doing. And when we look at $1,000 a month, even if we took delivery in April, that's about $5,000. If we were to assume that we were continuing to respond the same way that we've been responding into the fall, which is our current kind of planning assumption at this point in time. So you look at that $5,000, and if you look at the price, the purchase price of a vehicle and amortization over its 7-year life cycle, it certainly makes sense to advance the replacement of a vehicle, and in doing that, by replacing 2 vehicles, Councillor Scott, to your point, I think last year around redundancy, we would keep those 2 vehicles. So those 2 vehicles would remain in the fleet and allow us that response of 4 vehicles in advancing the purchase of 2. So that's the intention there. Things may change. We certainly realize that the response has been dynamic and will require to be dynamic moving forward. So there is an opportunity to revisit this prior to the issuance of the actual tender contracts, but we do want to go out to tender based on the numbers that we're talking about, and we can assess where we are at that point in time and whether or not there's a requirement to do that. There's also a new pickup truck that is DC funded, and very similarly to the explanation around the new tandem truck, that would simply be to address development related infrastructure and the requirements to be able to effectively adapt to the service requirements associated with development. Your worship, that's it for me. If there's any specific questions, we'd be happy.
A couple members of council. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Sean, with replacing so many vehicles, have you thought about checking with the county on purchasing with them?
Your worship, through to Deputy Mayor Huff, we have looked at that before, and we actually found that we get better pricing on our own. The pricing that we've received, there is a municipal fleet purchase program that, as Mark alluded to, from a timing perspective, that we typically engage in. But it hasn't been advantageous for us to look at any kind of bulk purchasing on any of our fleet vehicles. The pricing that we have received from going out independently has been the same, if not better, from our experience.
Yes, that's an analysis that we've been keeping track of very closely from year to year. Councillor Kane?
Thank you to your worship, to Sean. I had a question from the previous page, if you want me to back up there first, or do you want to?
Throw it back up.
Yeah, so the replacement of the cat loader, it says approved in the 2020 budget. So if that was approved and it wasn't used, that's sat in the reserves, and it's basically just before us now to document the fact that it's coming out, correct? It's not like there's no actual shift in money, it just wasn't used, right?
That's correct. It is coming from the vehicle replacement reserve, and it's just to show the accounting, because we don't take delivery until 2021. So we will incur it as a 2021 expense, although it was approved in 2020.
Yeah, Sean, if I could just add on to that, and it's part of what our audit requirements are, is we can't accrue capital that we didn't receive. So our rule of thumb, if it hasn't been started or hasn't been received by the end of the year, it needs to go in the next year's budget. I guess council has the prerogative in many times to say no to it, but it was approved. As Sean mentioned, this one's already been on order. It was kind of something that we were actioning, but it just didn't meet from an accounting perspective. That's why it's on here, more of an administrative piece. And you're right, it did not come out of the reserves. The reserves were a plus in the end of 2020, and it will be a minus in 2021.
But I asked the question more for anyone watching in the public.
Thank you. And you have another?
I do. With regards to the replacements for the pickups, and it says early replacement reduce rental costs COVID-19. A couple of questions, points. The fact that it's due to COVID-19, because in the comments it says that I guess staff has a requirement possibly to travel separately. Is that how this can be interpreted? I guess I should stop there with that question.
Your worship, through to Councillor Kane, we're not always able to do that, but certainly we try to do that as much as possible. Just given the nature of the work that we do, that's not always possible, but we do try and optimize that, and we have a requirement under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to do that.
Right, so there's, I guess, 2 points to this. Is this actually a replacement, or is it 2 new vehicles in light of the situation that we're in? The need obviously is not to use these heavier trucks to move staff, but also if it's a COVID-19 issue, an occupational health and safety issue, I was just wondering if there's any provincial or federal funding that municipalities can avail of for something like this versus taking it out of our reserves. And I understand completely that staff would be on top of any grants or fundings due to COVID-19. I was just wondering if there could be any justification, or if the money is actually there for possibly one of these vehicles to come from a fund like that or a grant like that versus coming out of our municipal reserves. I don't even know if this is something that would qualify, but you know, when I read about it, it kind of makes sense that if possible, we could try to put it in like that.
Your worship, through to Councillor Kane. So just to clarify, these are pickup trucks. They're not our heavy tandem trucks. And it would be an early replacement. So there is a 7-year replacement schedule. So essentially what we'd be doing is replacing them early. And the benefit is that right now we're renting vehicles, and those come at a cost of $1,000 a month, as I alluded to. So essentially, in replacing at a 7-year life cycle, if we were to take that $45,000 and amortize it over the 7-year period, it's about just over $6,000 a year. So essentially, for advancing those at $6,000 a year for 2 vehicles, to make it simple, is $12,000 for essentially 4 vehicles, because we would be keeping the other 2 in lieu of keeping them in the cycle. And then we'd avoid that cost of renting the 4 vehicles at $1,000 a month. So that's why it's being proposed.
While it says replacement, we are actually purchasing 2 additional vehicles as a future plan, 2015, 2016. So we're just doing it in advance, but we are actually adding 2 vehicles with the idea, with the 7-year plan, these 2 would drop off at some point. And that's why I was wondering, is there any way to possibly have these 2 new additional vehicles purchased in light of occupational health and safety challenges that we're facing through some sort of funding through the province or the feds? That's not something that can be.
Yes, if I might interject on that, one of the things that's happening is that we've remained in a current state of emergency. And one of the aspects of that is that we need to keep a continual accounting on all of these sort of things, similar to what Councillor Bean has indicated. We have no idea what proportion of that extra cost, if any, that beyond what we've already gotten from the provincial government, will actually be given back to the municipality because of the extra cost of COVID. So that would be something that we could put in our tracking system with the hopes that we do get a substantial amount. But I rather expect that we already have an extensive list already that would require us not to need that. But I think it is a good idea to have everything we can.
If I could add on that, to your worship, yes, we do have some funds that have been advanced for related COVID and safe restart. You'll see as part of our February meeting how we've allocated those funds. We've had a number of other costs that are incremental, additional because of COVID, safety supplies, staffing, et cetera. We do have a list of costs. So the municipality will benefit from all available funds. It may not be specifically directed to this one, but it will be used up and in its entirety for our operations. And really, this is strategic to kind of reduce our overall cost, because if our grant money's fixed and it's coming in and applied, this is a way of reducing our cost side of things by advancing 2 trucks and looking at 1/7 of the annual cost of the purchase being allocated to operations versus the rental costs. It makes sense that we reduce our costs, but we fix our revenue. It's a net win for the township.
I see no more questions, so you can proceed then.
So I'm going to go to the next slide, which is Chief Murray. We're going to talk through fire, and there's about 9 slides that I think is relevant to update council and the public on what's happening in fire and emergency services as a result of COVID and some of the announcements that happened this week. So Chief Murray, if you're on the line, I'll turn it over to you and I'll drive. Just let me know when you want me to advance the next slide.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Your Worship and members of council. If I go to the next slide, Mark, please. Your Worship, there's 4 items on here. If I can deal with the trucks first and then talk about the headquarters piece at the end, that would be preferable. We're talking about some vehicle replacements. So the first one is a 2013 pickup, a response vehicle. It's part of its life cycle, so it's at its 7 years to be replaced. It's part of our normal replacement cycle, and that's coming out of the vehicle replacement reserves.
Your Worship, if I may interject for a moment.
Yes.
It is very difficult to hear Fire Chief.
the mic closer. Can you hear me?
If you could go a little louder somehow, it would be great. I can hear you quite clearly, but I'm sure that some can't.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Sorry about that. Your worship, so I'll just talk about the trucks first. The 2013 is a replacement as part of the 7-year cycle. It's now it's coming into 8 years, but it's 7 years replacement cycle. It's out of the vehicle replacement reserve. The next vehicle is it's new to the fleet, but part of a redeployment of other vehicles. It's a 3/4 ton crew cab truck that'll be part of our more of a rapid response type vehicle for us, and gives us some ability to pull the airboat, the UTV, and things like that. So it is a new addition, but it's not impacting the operating budget, which we'll be going over in February. There's been some redeployment of vehicles and removal of another vehicle. So technically new, but not an additional piece of equipment to the fleet. The last one, the 1986 rehab unit, is past its 7 years. We extended this truck to as long as we possibly could. It's no longer feasible to keep this truck on the road. The rehab unit is a truck that we respond to emergencies with our firefighters. It carries equipment to what it says, rehab our firefighters, cooling chairs, misting equipment, medical equipment, carries food and water on the truck for our firefighters, and a number of other things. We've always tried to move vehicles around and cover this off. This unit carries a fair bit of equipment. The reason we were able to run it for so long is, as you can imagine, it doesn't run to every call, but it's no longer feasible to keep this truck on the road, so we need to replace it. It actually was approved in 2020 and was put on hold because of COVID. It was one of the projects that was pulled out, so it's back before you again. So I don't know if there's any questions on those 3 trucks. Okay, Mark, if we could go to the next slide.
Sorry, I know the deputy mayor had a question on the rehab unit, so I'm wondering if Deputy Mayor, you wanted to ask at this time.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mark. No, Hugh's already explained my question.
Great. So I'll go to the next slide then.
Councilor Kane has a question.
Okay.
Thank you, through your worship. I'm wondering if you can tell us where the rehab unit is located?
Currently, it sits out of the Warminster station.
Thank you.
And the 3/4 ton, that's a new addition?
It is new, but we are removing a couple of vehicles from our fleet, and we'll be able to better explain that in February in the operating budget. So it's a new, but not an additional piece of equipment. It's not we haven't had a 3/4 ton truck in the fleet, so.
Thank you, Hugh. With the numbers that you're giving us, I expect that some of these, as we turn them over, the vehicle we're replacing has some trade-in value. Are you calculating that in your numbers?
No different than everybody else. They usually go to auction, your worship, or they're offered to other departments first if they're needed in another department before they go, and then they go to auction, and that money goes back, Mark, into reserves, I believe.
Yes, they do go back into reserves, but I can say, Chief Murray, that the monies that we've received are fairly nominal.
Yes.
Especially for pickup trucks, we really don't get much out of it. And you'll see in our audited statements last year, we made $4,000 in proceeds. I don't think we had any proceeds. There really wasn't a lot out of auction that was notable to go back in. And we have a little more this year in 2020 that will come through in our audited statements, but definitely not a lot of money. I wouldn't say we could count on that going back into reserves. When we are looking at things like disposing of larger value assets, definitely if we're selling land or buildings or rolling stock or heavy equipment, there definitely would be considered in our budget as a net.
Councillor Kane?
Thank you, through your worship. Just a question more of curiosity than anything else. I'm not sure if Mr. Binns can comment on his side of things. What would be, say, the average kilometers on these vehicles that are now extended to a 7-year life cycle as they go up for auction? Because that's obviously reflected in the price.
Sorry, was that to me or Mr. Binns? Or
Both
both?
of you,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Our
township, I can't imagine the kilometers after a 7-year cycle of these vehicles.
Our pickups probably are around the 200,000 kilometer range. And if you count the hours that the trucks are running at scenes and such, it's significant.
Your worship, through to Councillor Kane, from our perspective, I'm going to throw out that word optimize again, and we try and rotate the vehicles around. We do patrols, and that is really intensive on kilometers. We do try and rotate the vehicles around kind of based on the function. And as the vehicles get older, they tend to move over to the community service side of the house for garbage removal and those kinds of things. And typically, that's when they're on their deathbed. I mentioned the extension of the life of our tandem trucks. We did the same on our pickup trucks, moving from a 5-year to 7-year cycle, and it has worked relatively well. But again, something we want to look at. When our vehicles do go out, we get very little for them at auction. So again, just kind of looking at that curve and what's optimal for replacement in terms of risk of maintenance and repair, as well as the residual value that you can get in auction. But high kilometers and at that point in time, very little value left in the vehicles at that point.
Yeah, I could add on to that. We do with our fire apparatus. We instituted that a few years ago, moving fire apparatus. So we just recently moved, and we'll talk about that when we go into some of our operational stuff, and that's things that'll be coming forward. But we recently moved the pumper from Station 2 at Hawkstone up to Moonstone, and Moonstone's pumper down to Hawkstone. Hawkstone being our busiest station, and Moonstone not as busy. So we're trying to extend the life and keep the repairs down on our trucks. Our trucks are typically 20 years old. Moonstone's pumper is about 20 or 18 years old right now. So. So the next piece I want to touch on is the fire headquarters expansion. Originally came to council last year, or approved last year. The budget was $400,000, and I'll talk about it here, but it's $1.2 million that I'm going to talk about. So I want to give you a quick understanding of the headquarters station. It was built in 1996, 25 years old. At the time, there was a fire chief, deputy chief, a part-time administrative assistant, and 12 firefighters that worked out of this station. Next slide, please, Mark. Currently, in 25 years later, we have fire chief, a deputy chief, fire prevention officer, a full-time administrative assistant, training officer, 24 firefighters. The special projects coordinator is currently working out of the headquarters station. As part of our a response plan, we have some volunteer firefighters that work out of here during the daytime, and then our ELC staff, when necessary, are working here as well. Next slide. So the area for Station 3, Horseshoe Valley, and the department has seen significant growth over the last 25 years. In particular, this area here, this station has become one of our busiest stations. If it depends on the year. Last year was probably our second busiest station. It is the hub for our department. It is our administration hub. We keep central supplies here. We have a gear cleaning here that has to be done frequently. Gear storage, equipment storage, minor repairs that we can do here are done out of this facility. It is our township emergency operations center, and it is also a backup for dispatch. So when our communications service out of Aurelia, when we've had tornadoes in the county, and that are all the communications agencies that deal with those things get overwhelmed by the number of calls, and we set up here and calls are transferred from Aurelia to us here to do dispatching as well. So this is the hub of the fire department here at Horseshoe Valley. Next station, slide, please. So the purpose of the addition, it will provide space that's currently needed and room for future growth. And we've talked about this before about this station, I believe was envisioned to be for 30 years out, and we're at 25, and we're bursting at the seams with some things. We have training props and things that are stored outside, and we do our best to keep them protected in the winter and that, but they're being damaged by weather and such. So this facility serves, as I said, as our EOC, full-time staff lunchroom. The current training room serves as our EOC, a lunchroom, the firefighter training room. It happens to be the station office for the district chief. It's a corner desk in the training room. And we do a fair bit of municipal training here as well, just because of we do a lot of first aid training and those types of things, and we keep that type of equipment here. So it's a very busy place, and the training room space is quite limited in there now for the number of people that are working out here, particularly our situation now. If we could have the next slide, please, Mark. So there's been significant changes over the years, and the need for more space and resources. Currently this training room can't be everything for everything out of this station, and we've found that when we first went into COVID, we fully set up our EOC. We had to put a couple of tables out on the apparatus floor for folks to have their lunch, and we had to pull trucks outside for our firefighters to do training and any kind of meetings. We had to do those types of things. This was identified in the 2014 master fire plan that came to council that said that additional space was required for a number of things up here, training ground and such. That was also will be coming back in February as part of the plan to talk about. It's being pushed out to 2022, but it relates to this. It was all identified in 2014. Land was purchased behind us, which is now going to be used for a number of things, but it was part of it was to be used for fire, water, and parks, and we see with the school and the water department and that. So there is space out the back that is technically part of our plan. We have in this facility, we do our bunker gear has to be cleaned on a regular basis. Every time there's a fire, all our equipment has to be decontaminated, cleaned, dried, and returned to the stations. It also is a requirement for us to clean and inspect gear on a regular basis, and we do that in-house because the cost of doing that externally is expensive. It has to travel to North Bay or to Mississauga or elsewhere to have those kinds of things done. The only thing we can't do to our gear here is repairs. So if it needs repairs, it has to be done by a certified agency for repairing fire gear. But we still have to clean it and maintain it. And where we're doing it and how we're doing it is not, it's partially in the apparatus bay, and we need a designated spot to be able to store gear properly and clean it and hang it up. We also have a diesel backup generator that's inside the facility. That was put in for Y2K, if everybody remembers that, when everything was going to collapse. They put a generator in here, and it happens to be a diesel generator that's inside the facility. And every time we get a storm, that thing runs, and it's quite loud. You can't hear yourself think out there, and it creates a lot of heat and smell and such. And part of the plan was to have that moved outside of the facility either into a separate little building or part of some kind of enclosure. our plan is to, with the expansion, is to just provide space for a proper EOC and lunchroom and such for our staff. Like I said, everything is happening, or we try to have everything happen in that space, and it's not feasible. So if I could have the next slide, please, Mark. So you may have heard this week on the news that the fire college is being closed permanently. I've been talking to council about these type of things going to happen over the last couple of years, and how we need to have training come in-house, because we were unable to get courses at the college. It was difficult for it to get courses. They've been pushing fire departments to regional training schools over the last couple of years. Live fire training happened at the fire college for us. Last year was the first year I was able to get the fire grounds booked. And then it was put on hold because of COVID, but we haven't been able to do live fire training with our firefighters in about 4 years, because we were unable to get facilities to train them. It's critical that we have live fire training for our firefighters. It's like throwing them on the ice to play hockey, and they've never worn a pair of skates before. You can't throw them into a fire and never had exposure to live fire. You can simulate all you want, but until you've been into a live fire situation, it's quite different. So we had the fire grounds booked. They still owe us some money back now that they're canceling closing the college. We have a deposit in there. But the college for us has been a great place, and you've heard probably some things on the news, but not only do they offer courses there, but it's an area where firefighters meet firefighters from other departments and share experience and gain knowledge and learn new ideas and that type of thing. And it's really unfortunate that it's closing, but we've seen the writing on the wall for a few years. But we had a call with the fire marshal Tuesday morning to talk about the new emergency orders, to talk about vaccinations, and the last piece was the fire college. And quite honestly, we knew it was coming, but we didn't expect it to happen immediately. So the new space, thanks, Mark. The new space will allow for in-house training. Capital for this training center and the facility had been approved in 2020, but we put it on pause because of COVID. We did finally put out an RFP towards the end of the year in 2020 to see what it would cost, and thought we would be able to move forward with the expansion. It had come back significantly higher. The building materials have more than doubled, procedures and such because of COVID, and it's really driven our forecast for this project up quite a bit. And you know, we thought we knew we were going to be a bit light what we originally proposed, but we didn't think we were going to be this light, especially not knowing what was coming down the pipe with COVID. So we did put a proposal out. Those prices, we never brought anything forward to council. Their proposals have technically expired. I told them that we would have to go back to council before we can even consider bringing something forward to council to talk about. So the expansion, if we could have the next slide, please, Mark. Okay, I'm back there. So really what we want to do is bring the training back inside, handle our training indoors, for us to go to regional training schools. So I'll give you an example. Firefighter going to the Ontario Fire College, we were paying $65 for the course. What that included was space in the dorm for them to stay over, all their meals, and the course. And if the course was 1 week or 2 weeks, the cost of the course itself was $65. We, on top of that, paid our firefighters a daily rate, plus some mileage and some expense to that. For us to go outside of our department now to a regional training school, we'll have anywhere from $300 to $400 for the cost of the course. $65 administration fee for the college for the course. Hotel expenses, meal expenses, travel expenses. So a course that maybe costs us $700 is going to be upwards of $1,500 if we can get them on the course. The college announced that it's going to have 2 live fire training props. The fire marshal told us that they've purchased those. They won't be available to the end of the year. And there are over 450 fire departments in Ontario that will be looking for use of these training props. So we've been moving forward over the last couple of years in our plans and such to start building our own facilities. We have a number of props that have been constructed that we have outside now. Part of our bigger plan is to have the training. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So part of our bigger plan, Your Worship, is to have some space for training, and for this facility really is to provide the space needed for the current level of staffing, the firefighters, and looking out another 30 years, having proper showers for the firefighters when they get back from calls, having a bit of a workout area, a proper training room, some office space for the district chief, a gear cleaning room, and storage for some of our equipment, and space for supplies and such. We are this year, we have a number of things that we have to do from a cancer. The Ministry of Labor has sent it to us from a firefighter cancer prevention checklist of things that we need to have in our facilities and things that we need to be doing, and gear cleaning and separate storage of gear and all those things are part of those things. And it's part of our plan to do no different than we've done with the new station at Station 1, is to provide those spaces that work for our firefighters, work for our staff, and provide the community a good service. Our challenge is, Your Worship, that the dollars are significantly higher than we anticipated, and that's why we're back in front of you. And I know Mark can talk about where the money comes from.
Chief, just one question that comes to mind. If we are building a training capacity, is there any chance of gaining back revenue and working with other municipalities to do training in that same space so that we get revenue back from that?
So our intent all along was, we have one of our training officers is an adjunct a training officer for the Ontario Fire College, and that means he can teach specific courses. Our intent is to have a couple more of our folks brought to that level that they can do that. We've always tried to, when we run an in-house course, share it with our neighbors and share the costs. We had something in the works recently with New Tecumseh Fire Department that we were going to be able to send some of our firefighters to a course that they were going to put on. And in turn, we were going to provide 2 of our trainers that teach pump operations in exchange to help them out. We had those plans in the works, and the fire college all of a sudden, no, you can't do that. You're going to have to go to a regional training school. They're trying to drive everything to a regional training school to make those facilities profitable, I guess, or provide them work. There's nothing stopping us from doing internal training ourselves. But it was raised with the fire marshal to say, you know, there are a lot of smaller departments out there that really either can't afford to send their folks to these training schools, or could do something like we just talked about, share resources. And that's still our hope that that's going to happen. If we have the training ground piece is separate from the expansion of the facility other than the training room. But when we get some of these training ground pieces in place, we will be able to rent that space out, Your Worship, to other departments. I think Councillor Kane had a question.
Councillor Scott and then Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the chief. Chief, have you explored Georgian College and their facilities, and as whether or not, I know that we already have a relationship with them.
Yes.
with respect to any type of training with them?
So without getting into too much of it, Counselor, part of the discussions we had with them, we told them our long-term plan, and I know there's interest there. We haven't proceeded any further with that, but I know there is some interest. Probably more interest today than there was a month ago.
Thank you. And your worship, supplementary, I got a couple of questions. Have you also reached out to other agencies, large agencies such as Mississauga Fire, who have a large training facility, or the Greater Toronto Airport training facility?
So the Greater Toronto Airport facility is similar to the regional training schools. The cost of courses are $400 or $500 plus. And Mississauga would be no different. But Grimsby, Innisfil is designated as a regional training center, but really a classroom type training center at this point. Grimsby has fire ground capabilities. Base Borden, sometimes you're able to rent the fire grounds there. There are a number of departments talking about trying to build fire towers and those types of things as well. We're not proposing to build a concrete structure for firefighting, but we are talking about some container type fire trainer facilities.
Thank you. And how many additional square feet are you going to be adding to headquarters?
I just wanted to confirm that before we came on. It's about 2,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And Mr. Binns, just a question for you. Our office space that we have that we've been allocating to the OPP adjacent to the fire hall. I know I mentioned it to you before. I don't know if there's really a need for the OPP to have that any longer, considering the proximity of their new regional headquarters or regional detachment being as close as it is now.
Your worship, through to Councillor Scott, it's really been pared down to there's it's basically washrooms, about 600 square feet that's occupied by the OPP. So the nurse practitioner occupy the large majority of that building. Of that 600 square feet, probably 500 of that is corridor utility for all of the entire building. And washrooms. So there's just a small office with a phone. All the evidence rooms, all of those kinds of things have been repurposed to the nurse practitioner clinic. So there could be, opportunity. It is still used by the OPP as a drop-in location if they do have emails, touchdown location, as well as the bathroom. But any kind of work in there would require, like the washrooms are definitely oversized for what they're used for. But again, that was all kind of part of the rework, and obviously having the secure area for the OPP. So some square footage could be gained in reworking the bathrooms, but the cost benefit just isn't there in doing that.
All right, thank you.
Your worship, if I can also say that part of this addition really is for the firefighters here at the station. They share this with headquarters staff. They really don't have their own space, if you will, versus another station. It's tight, it's shared. There's no actual station 3 space. It's really administrative and their trucks. So that's part of it, but really, it's really looking long-term for some of the things that we've talked with council about in the past and what we've done at Station 1.
Did you have a question? Go ahead, Councillor Kane.
Thank you. Through your worship to the chief, how much would it cost to move the generator outside, just that project alone?
I don't have that in front of me, but it's fairly significant because it's a 100 kilowatt generator that's in the middle of the building that's tied to all the electrical in here, but it was fairly expensive. I did ask, and if we move forward with one of the proponents, it may be cheaper to put a different type of generator outside. I don't know at this point.
So no guesstimate at this point?
I don't have it here. I'm sorry, I don't have it here in front of me. It's quite significant.
Okay, thank you. And have supplementary, Your Worship. Has there been discussions with regionalization of fire and emergency services, similar to what's happened with paramedics in Simcoe County?
Sorry, you broke up partially. I heard Simcoe County.
Probably, Councillor.
Right.
Probably, Counselor, through the chief, that's one issue that I think that we probably should not be getting into at this point. That's something that's more at a level beyond us. Okay. Mayor Huff.
Thank you, Worship. Through to the chief. I had two questions. One has been answered, which was the size. Where would you put this extension? You obviously can't put it in the front and back.
No, Deputy Mayor, through your worship, Deputy Mayor, it would go off the apparatus side to the nurse practitioner side of the building.
Thank you.
Any other comments? And are we finished with that portion now then? It appears to be so.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Hughes, I'm going to move to the next slide, which will be environmental services, and have Ms. Jacoby take us through the two items for environmental services. Michelle?
Thanks, Mark. So the two that we want to discuss today are SCADA software enhancements and replacement of a 2014 pickup truck. So just to bring everybody back to what SCADA is our supervisory control and data acquisition software for our municipal drinking water systems. It's a system that controls and monitors our devices remotely. It gathers data on process control, and then it sends all of this data to a central system where we can use it for operational control and reporting and general process control. For the mayor and the deputy mayor, you may remember that in 2017, the SCADA system for our drinking water systems was completely replaced. We replaced it with an industry-leading software from GE called iFix, which is a common software program that is used in drinking water and wastewater applications. The original replacement of SCADA was approximately $200,000, and it took us a large portion of a year. It involved electrical, mechanical, software, system integration. Like I said, it encompassed months of field work, desktop work, subcontractors, and staff and environmental services to get that software up and running. So the current capital project that's up on the screen today is for overall enhancements of the existing iFix system and associated equipment that works with the system across the municipal drinking water systems. Greater control, specifically the addition of enhanced remote control on some equipment is anticipated. It'll expand our functionality, increase system control time, support our operations, reduce our potential for non-compliance or health risks to our customers. As an example, SCADA controls and has the potential to control for us pumps, motors, valves, switches, transmitters, chemical dosing. It helps with our reporting, our communication, and it's important for us to keep updating this system, again, for compliance related, for operational control, and to help protect us as SCADA ages and some control vulnerability that we have as software ages. We consider this project increasing service level and providing continuous improvement. As far as the vehicle replacement goes, like other departments ahead of me have discussed, it's a straight up replacement of a 2014. In our case, it's a Ford F-150 cab and a half. So it's consistent with the 7-year vehicle replacement cycle and consistent with the existing vehicle condition. like the other departments, it's important for us to get this pricing out early January to make sure that we get the best fleet pricing available. And this will be maintaining a service level for our existing department. I'm open to any questions. Should anybody have any?
Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Jacoby. Ms. Jacoby, just confirm for me then the SCADA software enhancements will improve, enhance, and complement the safety of our drinking water, correct?
You are correct.
Perfect, thank you.
And the other thing, just to confirm as well, is that this the amount of money that you're talking about in this budget is strictly attributed to the municipal water users, correct?
Yes, you're correct. It's to the municipal drinking water systems that we have that are all outlined on our website.
Councillor Beach?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Michelle. Michelle, this looks very good. Strongly support it. Just a question. Are we in the next round, next week or in February, are we looking at other capital initiatives that we require in environmental services? I hate to bring this up, but for example, like the Zone 1 water piece or other capital requirements for water main repairs or replacement?
Yes, you're correct. There'll be an expanded list as we move forward with the capital budget. These two items were just the ones selected today based on necessary to move these projects along earlier in the year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments then on that department? Seeing none, we'll move on then.
Your Worship, back over to me. So on the
Sorry, Sean. Councillor Kane had her card up to ask a question, I believe.
Thank you for your worship. Sorry, Sean. Actually, maybe you answer this. I noticed Michelle has $40,000 for her cab and a half F-150, and then I think you had 2 or 3. I think it was 2 light trucks at 45, and then a crew cab, 2 crew cabs, I think it was. I'm just wondering, I mean, $5,000, but when tenders go out, do they go out for all the departments? Because I just wonder if, you know, a request for 5 vehicles from Chevy or Ford, if you would get a better deal, and if somebody, if water environmental services had the ability to be flexible, would they possibly get a better truck at the 45 that it can roll over to, say, parks in 6 years, 7 years? You know, I understand how the vehicles get moved around. I'm just wondering why there's a discrepancy or a difference, so much difference, you know, 3 or 4 different kinds of pickups. And I do understand the difference between a 1/2 ton and a light and the 3/4. I get all that. I used to put out tenders for trucks actually, so I understand that, but I'm just wondering if there's a cost savings if environmental services can go rolled into your requests.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Kane, really good question. And the differences in price really have to do with kind of what's being spec'd. So we will put roll up all of the pickup trucks and put those out as one tender, even though it's multi-departmental. So the departments basically submit their needs into assuming we're talking about pickup trucks, because there are different SUVs and different requirements there. But our pickup trucks are pretty standard. We do roll those out corporately, and there is a slight advantage, I would say, in terms of potential economy of scale. But the pricing that we do get back is based on, and I think Michelle alluded to that, on timing for the municipal fleet program. So they already come at a fairly sizable discount, but all of the trucks are also accessorized after that as well. So there's economies certainly on economies of scale on that side as we look at all of the other aftermarket accessories that do need to get added on before they're fully operational.
Thank you. Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering why Councillor Kane left out Dodge.
I think we all know.
You're lucky I threw him forward.
Hey, go ahead, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. The last one from me is similar to what we spoke about previously with new infrastructure. This is on the community service side, but also from an optimization perspective, it would double and be shifted over to operations. So we are looking at a number of new parks coming online. You'll see that in our updated capital in February, the Starfall Park in Braystone, expansion of the Warminster Park, continued expansion at Bayview Memorial Park, and really kind of focusing on the park system in our settlement areas. So this would be DC funded. It is a combo that has a dump box for landscape functions for parks operations, but also box slides out and it'll get retrofitted for winter operations. So parks seasonal, flipping over to operations in the winter. And our pickup and plow combos have come a long way. We've I think, as all of council is aware, over the years we've taken we've moved a number of services internally. Our parking lots, not only in community service facilities, but fire and water facilities as well. And a number of the cul-de-sacs, a number of the small roadways along the lakeshore and Bass Lake all require different equipment. And we've really been able to improve the level of service with using the right equipment. The other point I think I'd like to add here is a lot of the development that we've taken on, whether it be in the more urban type of development, like landscapes, and you'll often see our comments around snow removal as part of the development process, and making sure that we have the right equipment to, if we need to look at cutting banks back or doing snow removals, that's all part of our winter operations as well. So some of that more urban development does require more equipment and different equipment, and certainly more labor and expense in maintaining.
All right, are we ready to proceed then?
Andrea, if you could comment on the two for your departments, please.
Thanks, Mark. So Your Worship, there are two vehicles, one in the building division, one in municipal law. The building division, similar to other departments, is within the 7-year life cycle replacement of that vehicle. The second one, more where the focus would be, was within municipal law. And just a really brief context, municipal law currently has two vehicles. They have the pickup truck and they have the Dodge Caravan. They have been relying on buildings additional vehicle and did, similar to as Sean had indicated, and I know Michelle did as well, rent vehicles through 2020. When we increased the staff in the fall of 2019, the indication was we would assess through 2020 what the needs would be from a vehicle perspective. Given the rental in 2020 and the continued use of the building vehicles, we have 5 staff in total and 2 vehicles. So there is a need to increase the vehicle complement to have a 3rd vehicle for municipal law. This is looked to be, based on the review with staff, it will be another van, and it's primarily for that animal control purpose. So it will be patrols. We can't use the rental vehicle that we had this year for canine control. And we did have some challenges this year from the dogs that were picked up and reasons that we needed to have the vehicle cleaned after having the dog in the vehicle. So the vans are the appropriate choice and we can't use the rental vehicle. So that's why it's been added. And as it's indicated, it is coming from the reserve. So your worship, those are my comments. If there's any questions from council.
Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Ms. Lee. I trust that the additional vehicle will also, if it's a minivan or a van configuration, it'll be outfitted to be able to transport a couple of bikes if necessary, if we're still doing that program, bicycles.
Councillor Scott, we would be able to use it for the purposes that are needed for municipal law. So they're finding the caravan that they've got right now is working for that purpose, and then having the ability with the one pickup truck for garbage collection at the side of the road. That's why we keep the one pickup truck for that, but certainly the vans seem to be the means to provide all of their services.
Thank you.
So Andrew, do you have more to report?
No, your worship, that was it for me.
When I'm looking at the clock, I'm wondering, it's almost noon. It might be an appropriate time to take about a 15-minute break and then proceed after. I don't think we've got a lot more after that point.
Mayor Hughes, if you wouldn't mind, I can let you know there's actually only one more slide. And I think that it's probably appropriate to do that after the break. However long you'd like to take, Mayor Hughes, would also give us some time to work with the clerk on a motion for council to work through today's material and put that on the floor for council to consider. So however long you'd like, at least 15 minutes, but however long you'd like, Mayor Hughes.
Council, I'm suggesting 15. Is there anyone who would like longer than that? Saying now and then we'll come back at 12:15 then. We'll see you then.
Your worship, we're live.
Okay, thank you. I believe we're at the point now that we finished with Andrea's report, and I think we're back.
Okay, bye.
Your worship, if I could really go through the last slide, it really is a summary of our debt financing requests that will be part of our motion today. And just really highlighting the areas to recap. The 3.91 million is the road pavement acceleration that we've pulled forward, which is approximately 4 million. As well, the bridge work that when we did the 2020 budget, we had indicated was debt financing. Due to COVID and other priorities, we did not execute that debenture. And I'm actually glad we didn't, because the rates have come down significantly. And putting in the 2021 and 2022 bridge work. So what we're proposing we do, and the way this would work, is going out and getting a debenture. Obviously for the 2022 bridge work, that will not be done until 2022. We would put the funds into our reserve fund. It would earn interest on our side at very, very minimal rates, but we would then fund that out of an infrastructure reserve. So it's in and out of the reserve, but from a practical standpoint, we would get the money early at favorable rates. If we wait till 2022 to fund that bridge work, I'm concerned rates might go up, and I don't think they're going down. I think we're starting to see the markets recover in the currency markets, and I don't know how long this rate's going to last and whether that 1.44 is going to stand until we get all our paperwork done. But I'm recommending that we do this debenture now and take care of the both pieces of work for both the bridge and the pavement. And that's the end of the slideshow per se. And then I believe I can open up for any questions that council may have regarding the deck, which I just closed. I can put back up on any slides if you like. And if you don't have any questions, your worship, we can move to a motion and put that on the floor.
Thank you. I do have a comment though. The approach that we're using right now is one that we have used years ago. Perhaps Deputy Mayor Huff recalls that, where that did work substantially in our favor. Councillor Scott.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Delorier, just a quick question mark. How long would it take for you to get the documentation in order?
It's a fairly lengthy process and a big package, but I think the best practice would be possibly a month, and it does have to go through a number of iterations. I would try and fast track it. I have an appointment with our contact at Infrastructure Ontario, which is a provincial lending arm, to see how quickly we can do that. So it does need to go through a number of channels. And just I've done 2 of them in my time there, and they've taken a month is kind of a fast track, unfortunately. But there's a point at which the rate gets firmed up, and that's later in the process. So I would do it as quickly as possible.
Mr. Mayor, could I?
Thank you, Your
Could I
Worship.
comment, please, sir?
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, Mark, part of the cycle will be the borrowing bylaw as well. So certainly, as you lock in those rates and get into the process, there will be a report back with the bylaw and execute that, Mark.
Yes, Robin, that 1 month does include coming back to council with a borrowing bylaw and going through all of those iterations. So making sure we can get on the agenda for all of that to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Beach.
Thank you, Worship. Mark, yeah, I'm very much in line with your thinking on this. This is could be a once in a lifetime opportunity, and they won't. That rate won't stay here for long, I don't think. So the downside is pretty light, and I would certainly be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments then? Seeing none, it appears we're at the stage where we're looking at our motions now.
Mr. Mayor, pardon me, Councillor Kane wished to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Kane.
Thank you, through your worship. Pardon?
You're breaking up on us.
Oh, okay. I think it's schooling in the background there. Let me know if something happens.
Councillor Kane, could you turn off your video and you might have better audio?
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay, great. To Councillor Scott's comment a while ago, Mark, are we going to use the full amount of the debenture that council mentioned of the 4 million?
I actually was thinking about that, and Robin, in the resolution, if council desired, we could round up our request to $6.5 million from an authorization standpoint to start. If that works, that would then get us that 90,000 plus a little more. As I mentioned, it is a bit of a rounding piece. There'll be some up and down, but I think that might cover off what you were looking for, that it gets the $4 million that you did on the 16th.
Supplementary?
Continue? Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I would like to see it rounded up. We're putting out the tenders. We don't know, which was mentioned in our documents. We don't know the cost or the elevated possible cost due to COVID. So that's one thing. And I just wonder if, Mark, you can quickly reiterate the percentage that the return on our reserves gets. It's higher than 1.44. Can you confirm that?
You talking about our interest savings is not, but it is going down. The savings rates are like 0.7%. We're earning way less. It's prime minus 1.70. So it's a very small amount. We have a GIC investment. So we have about $9 million, $10 million in GICs that are laddering over 5 years. At the end of 19, I think our highest one was 3.6%. So we have some money that we're earning on some of our investments because we do it a 5-year rolling. It's basically dollar cost averaging. You get kind of the average rate, but you're always in the market. So right now we're on the good side of the interest. You'll see our interest in our budget. We're way ahead of schedule on our interest income versus where we should be at current rates. But I see that'll flip the other way because we're starting to invest at very, very low GIC rates right now. So we are looking at some corporate bonds as well. We want to make sure we minimize our risk on investments and keep them safe, but the savings rates are very small and they are less than the 1.44. They're like 0.75 or 0.70.
Councillor Scott?
I was referencing.
Sorry.
Specifically.
Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, as Councillor Kane indicated, rounding it off to have that extra $90,000, depending on the cost of materials and what the quotes are going to be, I think would be the prudent way to go. If my colleagues agree with me to pass this today, I would fully support rounding it up, and I would also encourage you, Mr. Delorier, and your staff to take this as one of our highest priorities. And outstanding work all the way around, Mark, for you and your staff. Great job.
Thank you. Any further comments before we see the motions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I could please, Mark, based on Councillor Kane's comment, the alternate resolution that we have prepared, Mark, because we're working remotely, Mark, the last section regarding the debt issuance would be 6465, which would be incremented by the 90, which would have accelerated road pavement management projects of 4 million. Am I correct, Mark?
Yeah, I think, yes, Robin, we're 90,000 short on the 4 million. So if we rounded up to 6.5 million, I think that would be a good round up number. Rather than being at 6.4 and change, I think 6.5 is a good round number for this purpose.
From an authorization perspective, that would clearly allow us to move forward. So 6.5 and pavement management projects totaling and leave it at 3.9 for now, Mark?
Yes, I think that's right, Robin. The 3.9 was just an academic roll-up of the specific road projects. But in reality, it may come in, obviously it's not going to be exact, so we may get to 4 million, but I think that affords us the piece. And really you're allocating, Robin and council, you know, how we're funding the road rehabilitation. You saw there were 7 sources. So debt financing is typically not part of it until we have a strategic opportunity, which I believe this is, and I think everyone agrees we should take advantage of.
So, Mr. Mayor, finally, back to Ms. Aubuchon. Yvonne, there would only be one change in the concluding paragraph of the draft resolution, repayment horizon totaling 6.5 million. That would be the only edit to that alternate resolution you're about to put on the floor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back to you, Madam Clerk.
Madam Clerk, whenever you're ready with the motions.
Moved by Councillor Greenlaw, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huff. Be it resolved that the presentations presented by Robin Dunn, CAO, and Senior Management Team re 2021/2022 budget presentations and deliberations regarding capital projects requiring January 2021 approval be received. That 2021 payment management program, as detailed in the presentation, in the amount of $6,060,000, which includes $1,885,000 for accelerated road projects, be approved. That the 2022 pavement management program, as detailed in the presentations, in the amount of $5,625,000, which includes $2,025,000 for accelerated road projects, be approved. That the 2021 bridge work, as detailed in the presentations, in the amount of $775,000 be approved. That the 2022 bridge work, as detailed in the presentations, in the amount of $950,000 be approved. That the equipment and rolling stock, as detailed in the presentations, totaling $1,620,000 be approved. Yes. That the replacement of the north and south yard fuel pumps in the amount of $145,000 be approved. At the fire headquarters, expansion in the amount of $1,200,000 be approved. That the purchase of SCADA software enhancements for water in the amount of $50,000 be approved. And that the treasurer be authorized to immediately commence preparation of the process for additional debt with a 10-year repayment horizon totaling $6.5 million, being comprised of the capital projects relating to bridge work for 2020, 2021, and 2022, totaling $2,465,000, plus the accelerated road payment management projects totaling $3,910,000.
Thank you. Does that cover all of the motions?
It covers, yes, it completes the motions with respect to the finance.
Thank you, Councillor Kane.
Okay, through your worship, to the rest of council, I wonder if we can pull the request for $1.2 million for the headquarters for Horseshoe Valley until Monday. I'd like to find out some more information. I'm not comfortable voting right now on that.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kane, Councillor, based on the body of lift that has happened today, the reason the alternate resolution is before council is we've concluded everything that we had anticipated lifting in today and Monday's meeting. That's why it has been formulated the way it has, Councillor Kane. If there's additional information, Mr. Mayor, certainly that particular item could be removed from the resolution pending further information.
Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Robin. Through your worship, Robin, that was my second question as you were speaking. Could we separate that from the vote with everything else? And I'm not sure if council at this point would support me in deferring that portion. I have some questions, or perhaps approving it partially and having it come back before us in 6 months when we know exactly where COVID is going to bring us. This is $1.2 million. This is not something that is urgent or of an essential need for service to the community right now. And I'd like to have more discussion with the chief and perhaps Mr. Delorier on this.
So, Mr. Mayor, if it was a desire of a counselor to pull out one item, you've done this before, Mr. Mayor, have confirmation on the body that is the alternate resolution and pull out the item with respect to fire headquarters and then deal with that separately, sir.
Thank you. So we've had that item pulled. Are there any other items in there that members of council would like to see pulled in the motion you just heard, other than the one that Councillor Kane has indicated? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I nothing else for me to pull. I just wanted to endorse Councillor Kane with this. This is, we've only had a short period of time to digest this, and it is 3 times the original budget. So I think it'd be prudent to pull this for a short period of time and revisit it.
Okay. So what we'll do now is that we will put on the other rest of the motion. We'll pull that one. We'll vote on all the other aspects of that motion, with the exception of that one, and then bring that one forward after. Are there any other than the fire hall one, are there any other portions of that motion that anyone would like to see pulled? Seeing none, then
Mr. Mayor, could I just ask for clarity on one thing? Ms. Aubuchon, if we remove the fire headquarters from this resolution and commit to council, we're back before you in the better part of 3 weeks when we are providing the rest of the capital and strategic initiatives and operating plans that we could then table it in conjunction with that resolution. Perhaps there's no necessity to have any further debate on it after this resolution is called, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so just to be clear then, there's general agreement then without voting to defer that, you're just removing that at this point. Is that what I understand?
Mr. Mayor, pardon me, that was I was trying to get the right articulation instead of having a separate resolution after dealing with this. And as long as Ms. Aubuchon is indicating that I'm correct in my methodology.
Your Worship, we could have a motion moved and seconded by Councillor Kane and Councillor Scott to remove the fire headquarters expansion in the amount of 1.2 million, and that staff bring back a report on January 27th.
Would you like to do that now before we vote on the rest of the motion?
And Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, there won't be a report, Mr. Mayor. It will form part of the roll-up with the updated presentations to council. That's all.
Your Worship, Robin, may I speak?
Go ahead, Chief.
I just wanted to say that approving this is not a go-ahead. We have proposals that we would have to review and look at and bring forward to council, and the detail would be in those proposals before anything would be approved. I just wanted to clarify that.
The nature of the motion that we have before us is to approve.
So, Mr. Mayor, Chief, if you were to simply remove that item from the draft resolution moved by Councillor Greenlaw and seconded by the deputy, and remove that item right now, it will come back. That's all. I realize Yvonne indicated that you could have a secondary motion coming back.
If I may, Mr. Dunn, through you, Your Worship, yes, we can just have it the same as we would have on our consent agenda or anything else that's pulled, that the motion, with the exception of this, be approved.
Okay. So, Councillor Kane?
Thank you, through your worship, to the clerk. Just for clarification, we don't have to pass or make an amendment or pass a motion for the rest of council to decide if they support this? I haven't heard from anyone else other than Councillor Scott. Saying whether or not they agree with pulling this.
Councillor Kane, I can tell you, my point was the same as well. This is something that's come before us just today. And I'm sure that we would like to see some more details before we go ahead. Now, the chief has indicated, wait a minute, yes, I understand this come for you today, but you need to understand that when you say you're approving that the information would be given to you later. And so what you're asking to do is let's see the information later before we approve. So it would seem appropriate that from what I'm hearing from all councillors that they are in agreement with that. If in fact there's any disagreement with doing that, I'd like to hear it now.
And Mr. Mayor, Councillor Greenlaw and Deputy Mayor Huff are the ones that right now own what's on the floor.
Mayor Huff.
Thank you, Worship. I don't have a problem with pulling that for now. I realize that from the fire chief's presentation today, it's something we've got to address. I've never seen the original report, and I was amazed when I saw the increase from the previous estimate. So I'm quite comfortable just pulling that one and getting some more information on the costings and before we approve it. I think we're going to have to approve it, but I'd like to have some more information before I do.
Mr. Greenlaw, are you in agreement as well?
Yes, Your Worship, I agree. More information would be better. I understand it that as the chief said, it has to come back before to be approved again anyways at some point, but I'm fine for having it pulled from this motion and let's deal with this separately at a later date. I'm comfortable with that.
So, Madam Clerk, I'm going to turn to you to put us back on track for what we need to do at this point. In terms of motions, I've heard 2 or 3 different options. Could you clarify for us?
Your Worship, I will just simply say that the motion as read by the clerk, with the exception of the fire headquarters expansion in the amount of 1.2 be pulled pending further information. And the rest of the motion is before you.
Thank you. And will one vote deal with all the matters in the what's been put forth?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, so we're now prepared for the vote. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Are there any other items to deal with, Madam Clerk? Or does that conclude our motions?
Mr. Mayor, if I could, there is only one item before the clerk would deal with wrapping up the meeting. And that is, again, Mr. Mayor, thank you for council's support. I do want to acknowledge every one of my colleagues in the preparation, not only of this material that was presented to you, but also what will be before you as we have discussions in early February with the rest of the strategic initiatives, capital projects, and the operating plan. And Mr. Mayor, I've worked with you and the deputy for the better part of 13 and a half years. And in my career, this is only the second time that I have been involved in endorsement by council on a 2-year planning endorsement. Thank you very much, council, and thank you for my colleagues in what was presented.
Thank you. And before we move forward, I know that every member of council feels as I do and appreciates the tremendous, although this was a sort of a half-day meeting, the tremendous amount of work that went into all of that information that we were presented, especially when we sort of dropped this on staff at short notice, the idea of doing this. So our certainly thanks and appreciation goes out to everyone that was involved in doing this great moving this forward. Madam Clerk, then I believe we're now at confirmation by law. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Hoff.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, from what was said and where we're at, I assume our meeting on Monday is not needed. Is that correct?
Deputy, I'll comment on that once the meeting is adjourned, sir. The budget meeting is canceled. However, if you could deal with this, we'll advise, please don't remove the block of time, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Confirmation by law.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Huff, seconded by Councillor Veach. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-008, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting held on Friday, January 15th, 2021, as amended to delete the Monday, January 18th, 2021 reference, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, being engrossed by the clerk, signed and sealed by the mayor.
All those in favor? Motion is carried. Motion to adjourn.
Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 12:46 p.m.
All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. And Robin, did you have a comment at this point, or?
I did, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Members of council, you do not have